Power Project family, happy holidays, because this is probably going to be out on Christmas Eve or Christmas. And this is going to be quite a gift because we have Thomas Delauer on the podcast. Now, if you don't know who Thomas Delauer is, he's this really, really jacked dude that Mark and I learned fasting from a few years ago. He has a lot of information on his channel about fasting, insulin resistance, just a lot of different diet practices. But specifically in this podcast, we talk a lot about fasting for athletes, the ketogenic diet, and how athletes can apply it to their lifestyles. You guys are going to get a deep dive into these topics because I know you guys have been curious about how we've been doing it, how we've been maintaining muscle, because all of us, Thomas, Mark, myself, and Andrew, we all use this shit and we're all jacked. So I hope you guys really enjoy this episode with the great, the awesome Thomas Delauer. Power Project family, we're partnering with an amazing brand called Viore. Now, Andrew, can you tell me your favorite piece of Viore clothing?
Yeah, dude, I was so shocked when I pulled out the Strato Tech tee. I was like, okay, cool. Nsima's been talking about it. Mark's been talking about it. This was my first experience. And when I pulled it out, I'm like, oh, like this is different. I know this is gym apparel, like this is performance apparel, but I was like, I don't want to mess this up, but obviously it can handle it. So that for me, dude, that was like the biggest eye-opening thing. I was like, okay, now I get it. You know, what about you? What's your favorite piece?
Well, I love the Strato Tech tee because I'm wearing the Strato right now. I love the Ponto short because the Ponto shorts, like I wear those to chill at home, but I can also wear those to work out. But the feeling, like I have two of this same exact t-shirt, one 2XL that I wear during podcasts and stuff, and the XL I wear during working out. But I have two because it's just so, and this is the last thing I'm going to mention, right? The colors, bruh, they have so many sick colors that you just don't see in other workout gear. I dig it so much. Andrew, how can the people get it?
Yeah, you guys got to head over to viore.com/powerproject. And when you do, you're going to get 20% off this amazing performance apparel. This is second to none. You can put them in comparison with the absolute most expensive, most popular brands, and Viore is going to beat them out. So again, that's viore.com/powerproject, VUORI.com/powerproject. Links to them down in the description, as well as the podcast show notes. Head over there right now.
All right, so we have Thomas Delauer here, but we've run into some problems because he doesn't want to be people's guru. And this puts us in a tough spot because both Nsima and I believe, I don't want to put words in Nsima's mouth, but I believe that he has gathered information from you, and so have I. And I've actually been utilizing a lot of the information that you put out there, even from like years and years ago. Same for you, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
So you come here and we're on our walk, and today you're like, man, I don't want to be everybody's guru. And I'm like, I don't know. Okay, I guess I got to try to forget all that great information I learned from Thomas. Now I don't know what to do with myself. So I think I'm just going to, just go into a perpetual bulk. I'm going to stop fasting, eat some carbs, cut all the fat out of my life, start weighing all my food. What do you think?
I think that's a great idea, actually. I mean, why not just go on a bulk now? We've been fasting for the past 4 years. Why not just reverse it and see what happens?
What's the worst thing that could happen?
Get a little fat, just lose it again.
Be all good. Totally fine. Yeah, I don't want to be people's guru, but I mean, I want to be able to disseminate good information and have people make a decision for themselves. And it's just, I've just reached this point where, like, how egotistical are we in social media? And it's like, it's to a certain point, it gets nauseating, right? Like, I love it when people are changed by the information that I put out. Like, I love changing people's lives, but I also want to make sure that people are not just completely oblivious to all this other amazing information that's out there. I am forever changed by different content that I see. I am always changing my stance on things based on like the evolution of my nutrition philosophies. And people, just by nature, if they start subscribing to just one school of thought, they tend to become not necessarily dogmatic someone that's consuming content doesn't necessarily become dogmatic in their way of thinking, but they become very just focused in that one way. And they're unwilling to look at other ways because it seems disloyal to what brought them to the dance in the first place. And it makes me sad to see that people aren't willing to look at other diet philosophies. They're not willing to try, because I've always thought, and the reason that I like fasting is because it's applicable with so many different diet strategies. It's a timing system, right? Yeah, I mean, I'm a keto guy, but that's just me. And I'm pretty clear about that. Like, I just like keto. I like to talk about it, but fasting, it's like, you know, if you're vegan, if you're paleo, whatever, you can fast. So like, why do I have to sit in this fasting only camp or this keto only camp when I know what works for me, but that doesn't mean that it's the only thing that's going to work for you. If you like what I say and it resonates with you and it motivates you, by all means, stick to it. But I don't want to be your only school of thought.
Why do you think we're losing? Like, why are our family members obese, dying? Why are our friends sick? You know, why is so much of I mean, you have millions of subscribers on your YouTube channel, and you've been pumping out information for a long time. I've been doing the same, and Nsima's got like 500,000 on TikTok. We've been talking about this. We got millions of downloads on this show. There's many other people that talk about fitness and health. But why, like, it's still so uncommon to hear somebody talk about keto or fasting when we're outside of our own little bubble or any diet implementation at all. So why do you think here in the United States, like, I think the fitness industry is getting its ass kicked, even though we've seen a lot of people profit and do really well based off of it. And we've seen a lot of people make a lot of progress and lose weight and so forth, but there's still millions upon millions of Americans that are suffering.
Yeah, you think you nailed it. We're in this sphere, right? And in the fitness industry and the health industry and the nutrition world, it's like we're in an echo chamber. Like we're talking to ourselves and we're just getting our rocks off because we all like validate each other. And it's just not, sorry.
Damn, that was put way too simply. Like, I got to leave. So I got to take off after that. No,
I'm sick of it. Like, I'm sick of just talking in an echo chamber. Like, I'm sick of, it's like, how many times can I talk about like X number of carbs? Like, that's, first of all, it's not mentally stimulating, but okay, I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole. We'll talk about that in a little bit. The point is, I still do keto. So let me put that out in the open. I still do keto. But
seriously, how many carbs do you eat a day?
29.3, unless it's a Saturday and I'm fasted, then it's, no. So
I was about to say, I don't think he's joking.
I just wrote that down.
Yeah, right? So, but as a whole, like, why it's so interesting that you put that. I mean, the world as a whole, not just the United States, but especially the United States, has a serious obesity problem. And we have a serious problem with just the abundance of food in general, right? Like, we have so much available, so much that's hyper palatable, and it's just available. We have, I think it's a dopamine issue, personally. I think I'm pretty intuitive with this kind of stuff, and I'm very self-aware, and I notice a very direct correlation with how much I'm checking my phone, how much I'm on my phone, directly with how much I crave snacking and how much I want to snack. It's like this dopamine hit, right? We are constantly seeking something. We have instant gratification with everything. So I think we have a bigger fundamental problem than too many carbs or too many this or too much fat or too much saturated fat. Sure, all those things have an interplay, but I think our biggest problem is we constantly have an itch that needs to be scratched, and we are always going for it, and we always have a solution, and we have instant gratification, and we have a sense of entitlement as a society where we feel like if we get the slightest bit hungry, we are entitled to eat a bag of chips, and we should. And that is our problem, is abundance and availability. And Amazon's just going to make that worse, right? Because it's just conditioning us. Like, if I don't have something in a day, I get pissed. Like,
you know, that you say that, dude. Okay, first off, within diet culture, it's like high frequency eating is still something that we talk about. Like, oh, breakfast. Yeah. And not like breakfast is bad, but breakfast, get your healthy snack. Lunch, get your healthy snack. Eat your dinner. And it's just consistently, if you ever feel hungry, have this fiber-rich meal to curb your hunger. Always respond by eating something. But Mark and I have mentioned, like, when we started doing fasting, initially it was a little bit frustrating, but it's the only thing added to my diet protocol that's allowed me to be in total control of my hunger, because I'll be like, I haven't eaten this morning. Last time I ate was like 7 p.m. last night. I felt a little bit hungry, but it's not a big deal because I'm used to that feeling and I can just keep going until I need to just eat later on in the day. But fasting is still something that within fitness, a lot of other individuals are like, oh, people are talking about it like it's magic or like it's going to make a big difference, etc. When it actually does, at least up
mentally,
here.
Mentally. Yes. Mastery, power, like mastery is everything, right? That's the mental fortitude to be able to handle anything. And fitness in so many realms is just discipline. And is it discipline to eat 6 meals a day at, exactly on the 2-hour dot, or is it discipline to abstain from food? And it's like when you look at, we always need to solve a problem rather than just like stopping, letting our body solve the problem. And I almost liken it to the men are from Mars, women are from Venus conversation, right? Men, like, what is the problem that women have with men? You're always trying to fix it. You're always trying to fix it. Just listen to me. Just stop trying to fix it. We're always trying to fix every little thing that goes in our body. And in an element of control, like we're a little bit hungry. Let's fix it because we're in control and we're doing the right thing because we're aware of our body and we're listening to our body. Listen to your body. That means, every single little thing we try to fix it. Okay. Like I understand that philosophy, but take a back seat for a second and realize that there's a lot more like that our body can do outside of just our conscious thought, right? How much, I don't know what percentage of our brain is actually operating in conscious thought versus subconscious thought, but I'm going to go out on a limb and say that we probably have more going on in our subconscious than in our conscious. So if our conscious mind is saying, solve this problem, eat, our subconscious is probably saying something different. So by trying to override our subconscious all the time, by trying to like prefrontal cortex our way through everything, we're just messing ourselves up more. Yeah.
Yeah, it's tough because, like you're mentioning, there are a lot of really delicious foods out there, but now I'm starting to see a trend of there's delicious choices that are more nutritious.
Yeah.
We can argue about like some protein bars and stuff like that back and forth, and like they might put you in the same spot because you might overeat them as well.
Yeah,
and sure. Overeating is overeating, but we're starting to get like more and more options. So I like the fact that we're seeing like Coke Zero, Pepsi Zero, like at least there's a movement. At least like some people are like paying attention and they're conscious. If we get the big soda companies and some of the people that are behind pumping out a lot of sugar and a lot of these convenient products, and they start putting out products that are at least quote unquote healthier, maybe that's a good start.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's, you could always rain on that parade and say, oh, it's still hyper palatable food. And it is. But I think we're still missing the point that we can't just rain on big food all the time because they're just following the money. Like right. We're voting with our dollars, ladies and gents. Like we are. Like, so if you're going to continue to buy the chips, then they're going to continue to make them. But if you start, I guarantee you, if everyone were to make a pledge, no one's going to do it. But if everyone were to make a pledge on January 19th, mark your calendars, we're all going to go out and we're going to wipe out every single store of broccoli. We're going to buy every bag of frozen broccoli. We're going to buy every broccoli stem stock they'd be like, what's going on? Broccoli's the new thing. Forget the Doritos. Everyone's gonna start making broccoli chips. And we vote with our dollars. Like they're just following. They're not necessarily, some would argue that they're trying to actually like make us sick and unhealthy. I think to a degree, maybe that's true. I don't know. I'm not qualified to say, but the point is that they're just following our traits, our habits, our spending habits. And I think that if it starts becoming big business to be healthy, then, and I think we're seeing it obviously, like the better for you options are just they're a thing. But just like anything, if they become hyper palatable, well, that's like with keto snacks, for instance, that happens all the time, right? Because keto snacks are delicious, but they're also 4 times as many calories. So because they're concentrated with fat.
Fat bomb.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like, oh my gosh, some of that keto chocolate, like it's so easy to overdo it because it's just like a fraction of it, in terms of volume. So you just got to be careful. And that begs the question, get down the biochemistry rabbit hole of like, does a sweet thing trigger a cephalic insulin response? Does something that's sweet, whether it's sugar, sucralose, aspartame, stevia, monk fruit, does it still make you crave more sweets? Is it psychosomatic or is it physiological? I don't really know, but it's doing something.
For me personally, it's not great.
Yeah.
I got to just pay attention to everything because I like food a lot. And so once I eat something that tastes really good, it just seems like I just want to eat more and more of it. And I'm better off just abstaining from it or trying to figure out a way to occasionally just cheat on my diet and eat something that's off plan.
Yeah. You're like me, man. Like I like food too. And we were both pretty hefty before, right? It's like, I'm not going to deny that I like food. So I think I catch flack from some communities because like I still try to try to relate with people. Like I'll talk about keto snack foods and I'll talk about my favorite keto snack foods because you know what? Life is short. But you also, that's where I like fasting. It's like, I get to like kind of, people are going to say, oh, that sounds like a binge and purge type mentality. But no, it's like a mental reset for me. If I am going to enjoy something, then I do also feel like I can still maintain control by having some elements of fasting in my life. And it's okay to like food. I mean, it's a pleasure that we have, right? But
before we go, because we're going to end up talking about a lot of different things, and I don't want us to talk about fasting, let's talk about something else and come back. So let's talk about some of the main benefits of fasting and why maybe some people should implement it, because there are people within different realms of like fitness, especially within the bodybuilding side, they seem to dislike it quite a bit. And I've seen that it's been super beneficial for me over the years, and it's been super beneficial for people I know, not just because of the way you can control your hunger, but also, I mean, conceptually, if you can just get in all your protein and your calories during the day, I haven't seen it really affect your ability to build muscle over time. You know what I mean? People have the argument of, oh, even protein feedings and all of that, but it doesn't seem to make that much of a difference.
No, I think one of the biggest levers that you can pull in terms of bodybuilding, building muscle in general, is manipulating your insulin sensitivity. Like, I can't think of a better way to manipulate insulin sensitivity more than to take a break from eating. Like, it's the same reason we used to talk about constantly, oh, well, after a workout, you're insulin sensitive, so you have your anabolic window, right? It's been preached for years by the fitness community themselves, the bodybuilding community. So they can't like say that works in one situation, but not in another. That's completely BS. Like, come on. So like, and you're seeing much more of the bodybuilding community being accepting of intermittent fasting now. Like it's becoming much more talked about. I just had Stan Efferding on my channel, you know, and we were talking about that. And Stan Efferding, like, even said himself, he's like, the anabolic window is kind of BS. Like, you have a lot more time to eat than that 30-minute anabolic window. So it's nice to hear from someone that's been on an Olympia stage that understands, right? That is respectful of intermittent fasting. And that's just one person, but I know that there are multiple others. And for me, I've had some of my best gains in terms of muscle after my weight loss, you know, so after I'd lost weight. And of course, I lost a lot of muscle with that weight loss, but then, you know, I've built it back slowly, and now I've kind of lost it again because I'm doing a lot of running. But the point is, I mean, it's...
How many miles are you doing per week again, just so people can understand this?
Right now, about 25, but normally anywhere between 40 and 70, depending on what I'm training for.
He said that. So, he said that.
Yes.
40 to 70. Okay, let's
so it's I'm nothing like Nick Bear. I'm not fast, but, you know, I can maintain my speed for at least 7 to 8 miles. After that, I'm just a slow 9-minute mile guy, just cruising along. So, and then people say, Thomas, you don't have huge legs. Well, yeah, because I'm kind of running a lot, but it's all good. And also just because maybe I'm just a big giant pansy. I don't know. But anyway, point is that, and I still manage to maintain muscle, even still doing so. But with intermittent fasting, you're allowing your body to become much more insulin sensitive. And when you do that, then of course, you have an opportunity when you do break your fast to capitalize on that. So one of the things that I really like doing is either having like a really early dinner, or sometimes just skipping dinner, which is hard to do with a family because it's kind of rude. But hey, like when you're a man and you sit there with your wife, the last thing you want to do at a restaurant is let your wife eat food and you not. That doesn't exactly make them feel good. And you kind of feel like a jerk. But anyway, when I have that in my ability to do so, I'll just skip dinner, or I'll have dinner early, which is great because we have small kids. So all about having dinner early. We'll have it, be done by 5, right? And then that means if I go and I work out the next day at, 8 a.m. or something, I'm pretty deep in a fast, right? So people are like, well, you're going to break down muscle during your workout. No, it doesn't work like that. Like, not at all, especially if you're producing ketones at that point. Even if you're not doing a ketogenic diet, you're eating carbs with fasting. After 18 hours of a fast, you're probably producing at least trace amounts of ketones, which are pretty muscle preserving. Now, that doesn't mean that everyone's not going to lose some muscle, but you're going to offset that muscle burn by when you finish your workout, then you break your fast. You're breaking your fast with a double advantage. 1, you're insulin sensitive from your workout. 2, you're insulin sensitive because you haven't been eating for 18 hours. So the quote unquote anabolic response, if you want to call it that, is going to be significantly higher. And yes, it matters how many calories you take in a day, but we all do know that there are, specific times where you can get more benefit, right? From insulin signaling and from muscle protein synthesis. After a workout is one of those times, at least a few hours after a workout, it's a little better. And so I feel like it's all about manipulating timing and really looking at that big equation versus and how many calories are you getting in total, right? Just because you're fasting doesn't mean that you're only eating 1,200 calories. If you're actually paying attention to it, it's not that hard to meet your daily amount of calories.
Yep.
So what I do is I look at my calories over the course of a week versus each day. How many calories am I at the end of a week? So if if I'm supposed to consume 3,000 calories a day, then I want to be around 21,000 calories for maintenance at the end of the week. Some days, maybe it's 1,500. Some days, maybe it's 3,500. Some days, maybe it's 4,000. At the end of the day, I'm ultimately getting to the same point. And it's, if I want to gain weight, then I bump that up and I try to get myself in a surplus of like 300 to 400 calories for the week. Okay. For the week, I don't go into these massive, crazy bulks. I try to get a small surplus. Same if I'm trying to cut a small deficit, because I have these like macro deficits that are happening over the course of the week. And then I have these micro deficits that are happening by spacing my meals apart certain ways, right? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. So intermittent fasting is just, for me, and then let's just back up for a second and let's think about cortisol and stress and sustainability, right? Bodybuilding is not necessarily sustainable for a lot of people. We were talking about your competitive history, my competitive history. That's not realistic. Like I don't want to, once you have kids, I mean, I can't speak for everybody. I speak for myself. Once I had kids, I'm packing their lunches. Last thing I want to do is pack my little like lunchbox too. Like I just, I'd rather just, it's like, come on, man. Like, what am I, 3? This is dumb. So it's like, and yeah, you're going to title this. Like, Thomas says bodybuilders are dumb. No, not at all. But my point is that I don't want to do that forever. And it just made a lot more sense for me to say like, hey, okay, well, some days I just take a break and I can actually do it for a longer period of time and keep it off.
I'd like for people to start to think of things a little bit differently. So like breakfast, for example, whenever you eat, that's breakfast because you broke your fast, right?
Yeah.
Post-workout nutrition, anytime after a workout that you ate, that's post-workout nutrition. Doesn't matter how far away it is. I mean, I guess you could say, hey, well, if it's 3 days later that you ate, then maybe there's, maybe that's not post-workout or whatever, right? Any food that you eat after a workout, you could have worked out at 8 a.m., and then you could eat at 8 p.m. It's still a post-workout. And we can argue about glucose and we can review a bunch of studies, but people don't study everything. And people don't study individuals that are usually pretty hardcore. You don't really see that. So that when I hear people mentioning studies all the time, I'm like, well, they haven't fucking studied me. Like maybe I'm being arrogant about it, but I'm kind of thinking to myself, well, I'm doing the exact opposite of what that study shows. And for some reason, this feels great. Yeah. And for some reason, I'm starting to hear more people say that this is working. So when it comes to like breakfast, post-workout, pre-workout, same thing. Maybe you didn't eat at 7:30 because you're going to train at 8:30 a.m. Maybe the food that you ate was the night before.
Yep.
It's still pre-workout.
Still pre-workout, man.
I mean, you understand the body really, really well. Does our protein disappear 12 hours later? Does our glucose disappear? Does our fat?
Our calories actually reset every day at midnight.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So everything.
I felt that happen to me.
Yeah. Yeah. If you're awake and you pay attention to it, you can feel it. It's really cool. It's like you feel it. You sit there and it's like there's this subtle click. And that's your body.
I felt that before.
That's their body resetting. Okay. It goes back to zero.
Okay, I thought that was
some people
boner or something. I misinterpreted that.
No,
it's.
Oh, go ahead.
No, you're good.
No, that's the one thing you're mentioning there is that's one thing years ago, especially when I've been focusing on building muscle, and also being an athlete. You always hear your coaches say, for soccer, have a carbohydrate-rich meal 2 or 3 hours before practice. Yeah. Bodybuilding, have a carbohydrate-rich meal before lifting. And it'd be in my head. So whenever I would lift on an empty stomach before, I'd be like, fuck, I'm so weak, blah, blah, blah. But after I started implementing some fasting, and then after I just started doing some training and not getting in my head, along with finally getting some electrolytes, because that made a big difference for me, especially while fasted, I was like, damn, my performance is actually really fucking good. Whether it's in the gym, whether it's doing jujitsu, I can be fasted and training, and I'm doing great because I ate enough food the day before. Yeah. And one thing people mess up, it's
the day before.
They don't eat enough food in their eating window sometimes.
Yeah, dude, you nailed it with the day before thing, because it's taken me a long time to figure that out too, because especially with fasting, you get kind of addicted to it and you start, it makes you so present that sometimes you forget about those, I say this term a lot, but like those lagging indicators, those things that do, what you ate before is going to rear its ugly head the next day. Especially with intermittent fasting, when you're like kind of you're just running on a very thin delta to begin with. So yeah, I think you nailed that. But another interesting piece is that for me, I've been training fasted for so long that I actually was getting in my own head and finding that if I were to train in the afternoon and I had eaten, I would have a crappy workout. And then I realized that I had to go back to some of my old school days and think like, no, I know this isn't real, because you can still have a good workout fed.
Yes.
Plenty of phenomenal athletes do. However, you can get yourself, there is a real thing. It's, peripheral insulin resistance when you have trained fasted for so long that your body, I'm going to make this exceptionally colloquial, but basically your body is almost rejecting nutrients when you eat before your workouts. And when I say rejecting, it just means the cells are like, whoa, you're trying to like cram glucose into me right now. I'm not used to this. So what I've actually done is, I'd say 90%, probably more of my workouts are fasted, but I will consciously make sure that I do occasionally do a fed workout too, because I don't want to lose the tolerance of that. And the interesting thing is, I'd say with specific anaerobic activities, I feel, if I had to put a random number on, maybe 5% stronger if I have some carbs in me. But I definitely, I feel my body very well, and I feel like I'm definitely not burning as much fat, right? I feel like that's stopped. That's just how I feel, but I'm pretty sure it's fairly accurate that, if I have a high degree of like insulin spike while I'm working out, I'm probably blunting fatty acid oxidation to a certain degree. But what I find that does is it maintains my glucose tolerance so that I'm good at both ways. I'm good at training in a fasted state where my body's good at utilizing fats as a fuel source and going through, liberating glycogen for the proper usage. And then I also want to be able to occasionally marinate my cells in glucose so they still know how to use that, because
Marinate your cells
in glucose. Yeah. Because it's like, get some of that Newman's Own dressing. And, I find that pancreatic beta cells really, and hepatic cells really like Newman's Own. They like the Thousand Island dressing. So
Delicious.
So it's, because I think all of us here, Mark, you came from a power background, but you're much more of a hybrid athlete now. You're definitely a hybrid athlete. I consider myself a hybrid athlete. You want to be dual fueled. You want to be able to be the best at using both. And who are we to say, like, carbohydrates are not bad. We just need to find the place that they work, right?
Yeah.
Like, they don't work when you're sitting down. They don't work when you're not burning them. They're designed. So for an active person, it's foolish to not occasionally convince your body to use glucose, because you'll develop a degree of glucose intolerance. And we want to be the best we can possibly be, not necessarily so one-track minded on just like looking a certain way. We just want overall optimization, right?
Yeah. I'm just curious, did you find yourself having, when you started doing some fasting, you leaned really hard into it, then over time you became a little bit more lenient? Because like, I find that I fast pretty much every day, but there's some days where I'm just like, I don't feel like I need to fast, and I don't. And it's perfectly okay. But some people, I think, I guess they're maybe afraid of doing it because maybe they think they'll go too far, they'll lose too much muscle, they'll lose too much weight, or get themselves into a place where it turns into slightly an eating disorder.
Oh yeah. Yeah, that's common. That's the people that are naturally going to like intermittent fasting or fasting in general are the people that thrive with it are probably going to be the kind of people that have that kind of inclination to go that way. Hey, can you support me one of those two? They're awesome.
I'll give you the citrus because this is a spicy one.
Sharing some
Element is
electrolytes.
awesome. That is not a plug, but I guess it is.
Yes, it is.
It can be.
Same time. Yeah, Element's awesome.
It's a butt plug.
So you're doing some lemon
It's a bitchy
habanero
one.
right now.
Yeah, the lemon one's good. Which, like, for fasting, by the way, is
Made a big
amazing what a
difference.
little bit of salt does in terms of like if you start finding yourself getting a little bit hungry. It's amazing. Like salt just kind of like nips that in the bud.
PowerProject family, I know you guys are enjoying this episode, but I need to talk to you real quick about Element electrolytes. Now, we've been taking electrolytes this past year, and they're one of the biggest supplements that's made a difference for all of our performance. Number one, because we don't cramp up during workouts anymore, but they allow us to be truly hydrated. Most people, when they're dehydrated, just reach for a jug of water and drink it, but you're not replenishing the electrolytes that you lose when you sweat. That's why Element has 1,000 milligrams of sodium, 200 milligrams of potassium, and 60 milligrams of magnesium, per easy-to-use packet. Pour it in some water, drink your pre-workout, post-workout, or even during your workout, and trust me, you're going to feel a difference. Andrew, can you tell them how to get it?
Head over to drinklmnt.com/PowerProject. Get a value bundle because you're going to get 4 boxes, any flavor you want, for the price of 3. That's what we do. That's what you should do. Links to them down in the YouTube description as well as the podcast show notes. Let's get back to the podcast.
So, the kind of the addictive side of it. I think it comes with some maturity with fasting, right?
Yeah.
So people are inclined to think that they're tougher when they grit through it and fast longer. And it's kind of one of those things, like, I liken it to the same aspect as like rest days with training. It doesn't make you tougher because you went 10 days in a row working out. What makes you a better lifter and a better athlete is having the mental toughness to know when it's time to stop and to know when you're overtraining, right? I made much more gains when I did that, right? When I was like, wait a minute, you know what? I'm probably doing too much. Let my body recover. That takes a lot of strength. That takes a lot of work. And it's the same with fasting. It doesn't mean you grit through more. Sometimes the answer is as simple as being a little bit more lenient and taking some time off. But the other thing is that, simply put, fasting needs to always remain the anomaly. It needs to continually be ever so slightly the minority of what you do, because then it's going to maintain its power. That being said, if it is a lifestyle that works and you enjoy the lifestyle aspect of just skipping breakfast and stuff like that, by all means, that's fine. But if you're trying to get it to elicit a change beyond where you're at now, it needs to be the anomaly. It needs to be the different shock. I hate saying shock to the body because it's like so
muscle confusion.
You'll shock your body. Guarantee you that your body knows what is going on way more than you do, and you're not going to shock your body. I say your body's going to shock you when it decides to, like, you keel over with something because you thought you shocked it, right?
Yeah.
Point is so take a break, become more lenient, but also, like, how long are you in this for? You're in it for the long haul? Because you're not going to fast every day for 20 hours. And I do 7 24-hour fasts a week.
Yeah.
While we're sharing all this information, I think, put very simply, a lot of people that struggle with their nutrition, they need to spend less time eating and more time fasting for a period of time, whatever shift that is, whatever, maybe it's just that they start to just eat later in the day, or maybe they start their fast at night just a little earlier. However, it's also important to note that the people that are under normal circumstances, the people that are in the best shape, the people that we see on Instagram, most of the people that are super jacked, most of what Stan Efferding preaches and what a lot of his athletes follow, these people are burning tremendous amounts of energy every single day, and they're consuming tremendous amounts of energy every day. So I want to make sure that people fully understand that we're not saying that if you're looking for maximum performance, we're not saying that you have to fast to have great workouts. No. And we're certainly not saying that you need to stay fasted after your workout. This is just something that has worked really well for the three of us in some of the information that you share. It's helped a lot of the people there as well. But this is where stuff gets kind of confusing, because you were mentioning there's even like some research and some studies showing that the goal and objective overall is to be a fuel burning machine that is consuming quite a bit of fuel. Yeah, this is the big paradox though. It's called G-Flux, and there's some interesting stuff, and I've recorded a few videos on it. Chris Melding did some interesting research on this, but it's essentially, people are going to flame me for saying this, but the goal, is to be able to be at a net neutral, that balance of calories in, calories out, at net neutral at the highest caloric intake possible. Okay. Shouldn't say possible, but maybe like the more calories you take in and the more calories you burn, the higher your resting metabolic rate will be. Okay. So it's called G-Flux. You would look on paper that someone that is consuming 2,000 calories a day and is burning 2,000 calories per day is going to end up in the exact same position as someone that's eating 5,000 calories per day and burning 5,000 calories per day, right? Like they're both at maintenance. Yeah. So they're both going to maintain the same weight, right? Wrong. The person that is eating 5,000 calories and burning 5,000 calories is going to have quite a significant resting metabolic rate increase. Okay. Because it's called G-Flux, and nobody is really 100% sure as to how it works, right? The mechanistic target, like
We don't really know.
So
But
maybe because of that, the 5,000 calorie person might be getting like leaner and better results than the 2,000 calorie
an increase
person.
in basal metabolic rate. And that's been demonstrated, but it's even the researchers that are in it are like, we don't really know why this is happening. But G-flux, just by very nature, G-flux itself just means like the energy cost of like burning calories. So one of the possible theories is, does the actual act of burning a calorie burn calories?
And it certainly does with protein and things like that, right? Thermic effect of food.
That's a thermic effect, but like when you get down to like the physics of it, and I'm not a physicist, so I mean, I'm not qualified to talk about that really, but it's just, it's interesting. And a lot of it just comes down to the fact that it's just more overall turnover, just more shit is happening. And that's everything is working in overdrive, but that's also having an afterburn effect on everything. Whereas like, okay, now as a result of that, you're exchanging more nutrients, more nutrient partitioning, more kinds of things going on. So, but, you know, one of the things that I'm really just adamant about is that fitness and health, that combination, that when I set out to build my brand, that was what I wanted to do, is I wanted to bridge the gap between health and fitness. I was like, there's this gray area between there. It's like, you're either a foo-foo weirdo granola person or you are like a meathead juicer. Like, how come there's no, like, why can't we bridge that? Because fitness should be healthy, but fitness is not generally healthy, and healthy is not necessarily fit. So let's bridge that. So I think it's a balance, always a balance of mTOR and autophagy, right? mTOR and AMPK in these two worlds. So that means periods of time where you have high calories with high output, but also periods of time where you have low calories with low output, and being able to rev up sort of the autophagy process. You do that for periods of time, for the autophagy, for the longevity, for the cellular signaling, for the rejuvenation, if you want to call it that. And then you have periods of time of growth, right? Because when you look at the research too, people think that mTOR automatically, you know, mTOR for the listeners, mammalian or mechanistic target of rapamycin, that is ultimately the anabolic signal. And although it has some negative connotations surrounding it with certain cancers and things like that, people automatically assume that mTOR is bad. No, there's also a lot of evidence that mTOR is very good and pro-longevity, but it's a balance of mTOR and autophagy, which oppose each other. So with that, it's frustrating because you like, which camp do I sit in? But you always need to find a balance. Like, you need to have pro-growth signaling to repair, to rejuvenate, to have cells do what they need to do. But then the other piece is, if you have, and people will probably make this argument, people that are understanding of the subject matter, if I am encouraging people to eat significantly more calories, but also burn significantly more calories, wouldn't that equate to more oxidative stress? Because the burning of food in general creates oxidative damage. Like, it creates reactive oxygen species.
Maybe inflammation and stuff like that too?
Yeah, it can. And, you know, but we have to take that with a grain of salt, because, no pun intended.
You know what's coming.
Some pink Himalayan sea salt.
Such a dad.
I was like, that's living.
I don't take it with a grain of salt. I take it with a Himalayan salt lamp.
With a cube of sugar.
Yes. So, you know, with that, it's like, the more oxidative stress that we create in a healthy, operative word, healthy human body, or body in general, the more that our body develops the ability to deal with that. So it's like, for example, when we fast, we are creating an oxidative stressor. We are stressing our body because it's under stress, it's not being fed. So wouldn't that argument apply there too? But one of the benefits that we talk about so much with fasting is that when you are under that stress, your body upregulates superoxide dismutase, it upregulates glutathione to deal with it. And you become better at that. Your body's inherent detoxification processes. I hate that word detox, but like, it's, you know, that process. So it's a balance once again. So when you eat more calories, but you're also burning more calories, you're kind of bringing yourself to a net neutral at the reactive oxygen species level. But again, if you do that every single day, you know, what's that saying? Burn hot, die young. It's like, if you are burning a lot, it's like, yeah. So you should take some periods of time and just fast. And, you know, Dominic D'Agostino is someone I hugely respect. And this video will might even really, I don't know, but I'm flying out to Tampa to go to film with him, because I think he's one of these guys that's like he looks at it like this, right? He's a big keto guy, but he looks at this. Have you had him on the show yet?
Yeah, I have. Yeah, he's amazing. I've collaborated with him in the same spot that you're going to coming up. I actually don't remember. We had him on. Did we have him on the show?
Yeah, I think we had Zoom.
Okay, yeah, via Zoom. But yeah, I met him in person.
Dude is
talked.
Just one of the most incredible human beings. Like the guy is just so calm, cool, collected. Just walks with a big stick. The guy just has so much confidence and doesn't need to flaunt it. You know, just, I don't know, just nothing but respect for that guy.
Super kind. Yeah.
And you know, he's kind of got like that approach too, where it's like, I mean, what did he like? I can't remember. I'm going to butcher the numbers, but I think he like deadlifted like 700 pounds after a 7-day fast or something like that. I mean, it's just like talk about like taking that whole thing that people think and flipping it on its head.
Yeah.
Right. And so I know that he kind of shares the same philosophy with me on a lot of that, with like, it's a balance of mTOR, autophagy, and, you know, reactive oxygen species and how that works in the body.
And what you're saying with this G-flux type of thing, is there any research or information that you're aware of that like the more, you know, people sometimes say like a sugar burner, or the more, I guess, maybe carb tolerant somebody is, are those people usually not heavy? Are those people usually like pretty healthy?
That's a good question.
So I mean, it's just popped into my head because I'm thinking of like, you're talking about some of these people that do like 5,000 calories and burn 5,000 calories. They're kind of like running off of diesel rather than running off of gasoline.
That's a good
almost.
way to put it. Yeah.
And then maybe some of the people that are maybe a little bit more carb tolerant, maybe they are naturally a little thinner. Maybe some of that is a genetic component along with the stuff that they've been doing over the last several, like he grew up playing soccer.
Yeah.
You know, it's like maybe from running around playing soccer, all that movement, as opposed to maybe me, you know, sitting there playing Tecmo Bowl and fucking eating Doritos.
And you know what I mean? Talked about that, like exactly. Like, and I ran my first marathon when I was 11, right? So same thing. Like we both were conditioned. I mean, you'd say that soccer is still largely more aerobic than anaerobic, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, we both grew up in heavy like aerobic settings. And then got the itch to build muscle, right? So it's like, that's an interesting rabbit hole to go down that can really influence, I believe, how we oxidize like different substrates. And it's tough because it can flip a lot of the calories in, calories out conversation on its head and make it a very difficult conversation to have. And I'll get this off the table first, is that the calories in, calories out is still going to matter, but it's going to matter at a different varying rate that we may not be able to know, right? So it's like, you may think I need 3,000 calories a day, but maybe there's all these different things that are influencing that throughout the course of the day that make it different. The law of physics and math still applies. We just don't know where it is, right? We just don't know where that number is. So it's like, we know this exists because it's fundamental. And, but there's also just holes that you could poke in that too. It's interesting to look at both sides with that. As far as, I think what you're ultimately alluding to is like an epigenetic sort of thing, right? So if you put it like this, let's say I'm in a locker room and there's 100 lockers, and all of those lockers are my genetic code. They are my genes, right? What people don't understand is that you don't just have these God-gifted genes that you express, then you just open all of your genes, right? So it's like Pandora's box almost literally. Like you might open 75 of those 100 lockers in your lifetime, and you still have 25 lockers that you never opened because you never encountered a circumstance in which you needed to open those 25, right? That is called gene expression. Each time you open a locker, that is gene expression. You are expressing that gene in order for it to act upon your DNA, your cells, and do something. Gene expression, if you ask me, is one of the most powerful things that we are starting to, no pun intended, unlock, right? And so perhaps you and I, by doing aerobic work at an early age, we opened up 10 other boxes, 10 other lockers that allowed those genes to express at such an early age that made us the kind of people that can thrive with fasting. Because aerobic work is definitely very much so beta oxidation, very much so trace levels of ketones, very much so fatty acid oxidation, which is also coincidentally what works well with keto and fasting. So maybe we respond really well to that because at an epigenetic level early on, we opened those lockers. Whereas Mark opened a different 10 that maybe we haven't opened. And at the later in life, this is hypothetical, but later in life, perhaps it's harder to open those.
I opened up a pantry full of Snickers bars.
Yep, exactly. What was in your locker? That's in my new mantra. That's my new shirt. What's in your locker? Like, kind of like what's in your wallet. But
yeah.
Andrew is always kind of like in a constant flux of his own over there with like whether he should fast or not fast, because I think Andrew kind of fights what a lot of the people that are listening to the show fight. They like want to get more jacked and they want to have more muscle. So then they're kind of like, I know that fasting might help get rid of my belly, but I don't want it to get rid of my arms too. Like people are kind of, what are some of your recommendations for that?
Yeah.
When someone's in that bubble.
And I wanted to ask, cause like just if there's any evidence or anything that would, I don't know, make sense of my experience with fasting. Prior to fasting, I, was just like many people, I'd consider myself a hard gainer.
Yeah.
And, I was like, I eat so much, I can't gain weight. But what I would do is I would eat breakfast, oatmeal, something very not satiating.
Yeah.
I'd get here and I'd eat something else small, not satiating. I'd have like a very simple lunch. I'd go home. So I'd have like a decent amount of calories, but like not a lot, right?
Yeah.
I'd get home and by the time it was dinner, I'd be like, I'm not even that hungry. Like, like I'm not, I can't eat a lot because, whatever, blah, blah, blah. So I'm curious, is there any evidence that would show like once I started fasting, okay, food was all off the table. So no more bullshit food throughout the day. But then dinner time came and I was like, dude, I could eat so much now. This is amazing. It seemed like it like sparked my appetite. It did like the opposite of what kind of it gets promoted for. You know what I mean? Like it didn't, it helped me control my hunger, but it made me eat more and I was very grateful for it. But I didn't know if that was just my one-off experience or if that happens like, to everybody else.
That happens to me. That's definitely the way I am. So I think that is definitely just how you're wired. For me too. It's, but if you were to do that every day, eventually your basal metabolic rate would slow down to a point where you probably wouldn't have as much appetite. So if you ask me, that's how you know it's working. I don't want to use intermittent. If you're not hungry, that is a good indicator your metabolism is slowed down. Mm-hmm. Not saying that is necessarily a bad thing. It's what it's supposed to do, because your metabolism slows down as a compensatory mechanism to preserve. So like if your body recognizes, oh, this guy's only eating 1,200 calories per day. If your metabolism stays elevated to where it was before, while you're still eating 1,200 calories per day, you're going to be burning up all your tissue. So your body does it to save you. It's a good thing. So stop hating on the body for doing that, because it's saying, oh, let's bring the metabolism down. Let's shut down some processes, make some things more streamlined so this guy doesn't burn everything, because this is the new norm. This is what he's doing now. So I like it when I'm done with a fast and I'm ravenous, because that means that my metabolism is still at a decent rate. And it means that what I am going to eat, at least as far as I'm concerned, it feels like it's going to be assimilated.
Yeah.
I love that feeling. Like nothing is better than, it's like an orgasm when you're hungry and you get to eat.
Yeah, honestly.
Yeah. So
It
it's
really
like,
We make that connection all every
Every
day.
fucking event.
Every day I'm
Literally
breaking
a
my
fucking
fast, I'm
event.
coming. It's just,
But we talk a lot about like strategies for curbing hunger, on the show quite a bit. And obviously protein super satiating. A lot of people talk about fiber, but I think it is super beneficial to pick up the habit of fasting and structure it into your lifestyle so you can get used to hunger and so you can get used to letting it not be uncomfortable to you, because that gives you, if you're able to do that, because most diets, or a lot of diets that people talk about, are diets that whenever you do feel hungry, you respond to it, and you get in your amount of calories, you get in your fiber, you get in your micronutrients, but you're always responding to it. So in the long run, if you do manage to drop the amount of body fat you're trying to drop and you get to this body composition, hunger is still up here, and it's still something that that's always honestly in control of you. And if you can somehow implement fasting and get yourself used to feeling hungry and not responding and rep that out over the months and years, you get to a point where your hunger isn't a factor for you,
Yeah, totally.
That's a big deal.
Totally. Yeah. You kind of learn to appreciate hunger, because hunger is, I talk about this in videos a lot. Like hunger typically tells you that you're actually probably in burning fat at that mode, right? Now that's colloquial, because hunger is complicated. Like it is complicated. Lots of different hormones interacting, lots of different signals. So it's immature to say that that just means you're burning fat. But
Jack LaLanne used to say that. He used to say like you should be hungry, and his thought was you should also look like you need to eat a sandwich, like because your face should be kind of gaunt. Like that's the. It sounds kind of funny, but that's where you get to when you're doing keto.
He's laughing because like. Oh man, it's just like I think people.
Your audience.
Oh my gosh, Thomas's face looks sucked in. He's got circles under his eyes. Let's just clear the air for a second, okay? I maintain 6 to 7% body fat year round. I have for 8 years now.
Damn.
Shit.
Okay, like I sleep like shit because I've got a toddler going through a sleep regression. And it seems like that's anyway. Point is, I'm not going to justify. I don't sleep real great, okay, and probably because I train a lot, probably because I
think you look great,
but
You do look
fantastic.
okay. And I'm not
Awesome.
I'm not just saying this because it's a justification, okay, but Scandinavian descent. I've got these high cheek.
This is so good.
Seriously, I got freaking high cheekbones. All right, and then I'm lean on top of it. And then a lot of times I'm doing my selfies with a hat, so it's casting a shadow. So I get this weird. I'm telling and then people see me in person. I've literally had probably 5 or 6 people that have seen me in person be like, "Oh, you don't even have dark circles in your eyes in person."
In person, you don't.
It's-
You really don't.
It's like it's the way that maybe you should all like.
That's so good. People say that to you in person. That's so funny.
Oh, because I made a big deal. I made actually a whole campaign out of it because I was just like, this is just getting stupid. Like be like, well, I can't take health advice. Then don't fucking take my health advice. God, like go somewhere else. I don't care. Like, are you that concerned with like my welfare? Like,
I love it.
Are you gonna call CPS on my mom?
I was unaware that like you were getting that.
Oh, that's a thing. It's a thing. It's probably on Reddit somewhere too.
If you're getting shit for your looks, we're all doomed. Is what I'll say.
That's
you
true.
look great,
Yeah, that's true.
and you look fucking super fit, and you look more jacked than I've ever seen you.
And 6 to 7% year round.
That's impressive.
What do you think? And how long have you maintained that lean of a body fat percentage year round? Because when I years ago, when I was 2015, when I prepped for a bodybuilding show, I got that lean. But because I was still eating all the time, right?
Yeah.
When I got that lean, I was just like, there's no way I can maintain being super lean year round.
Yeah.
After I started doing some fasting, control of hunger, slowly got back to a lean body composition, and now I can maintain 7-8%.
Yeah, so say you're about 7-8 right now, right?
Yeah. But before, I would have felt like absolute crap. So what do you think are the protocols, or what allows you to maintain this and feel great?
So here's where I have to get on my keto high horse for just a second. Okay. I definitely tried it both ways. I feel like maintaining, this doesn't necessarily apply for weight loss, right? Not necessarily for weight loss, for maintenance. I do feel like keto allows me, I have more energy at that low body fat range on keto than I do with carbs.
Agreed. I'm low carb. I'm fairly low carb. I have really high fats, but right now, in the past few years when I've been this body composition, the only reason I think I've been able to feel good this lean is because my fats are pretty fucking high.
Yeah.
I'm pretty low carb, and it's doesn't feel bad at all.
Yeah, I definitely, because as soon as
your calories are pretty good because jujitsu, just to your point about the 5,000 calories versus 2,000 calories, all you changed really, you just expended more energy, and then you started eating more energy because you had to, because otherwise you wouldn't be able to perform well on the mats, right?
No,
Exactly.
You're exactly right. Yeah, it's interesting. I think, and some of it comes with just this is where my body likes to be actually. Like it's, or I haven't asked it lately, but I can assume.
Your body's like, fuck you, man.
Yeah, I was doing some VO2 max testing and bod pod stuff a while ago, and I was at and I wasn't feeling at my absolute best, and I was, when I did the bod pod on that one, I was 7.7% or something like that, which is it's still very lean, obviously, but it's on the higher end of where I usually sit. Okay, right? So it's and I noticed, and then so I'm like, okay, I just bring it down a hair, bring it down to 6.5 to 7, which I feel really good at. So I think my body's it's been there for so long that that's just where it feels good. And any increase in body fat with anybody is likely going to trigger at least an initial inflammatory response. So perhaps I just am so in tune with my body that as soon as I start to feel that inflammatory response, I reel it back because I feel it in my joints. And I think a lot of it is because being previously obese, being really overweight before, I think that I'm probably I start to feel the stuff in my joints really quick. My joints aren't that great. So when I start finding any kind of inflammatory factor, I feel it. So I just feel better being lean. I think I sacrifice some things. I think, it might affect sleep. It might affect these things that are happening kind of unconsciously.
What happens because you mentioned this like enormous amount of running. And so the calorie equation always baffles me.
Yeah.
I just find the whole topic really fascinating, and I see all the different sides of it, and I just have always been really interested in it. So like, I don't know, let's say that your knee is jacked up or your ankle and you have a couple of weeks where you're not running. Yeah. Do you start to make a conscious effort? You're like, there's less output, or are you trying to get output somewhere else? Or like, what would happen to you if you didn't have that output?
Yeah. Well, I go through periods of time where I definitely don't, right? Like right now I'm living up in Tahoe and we just got like 6 feet of snow, right? So like
more coming tomorrow.
I'm not running. So you know what I did? I did the thing that people will probably make fun of me. Like I got a Peloton, right? So like, I think, by the way, like I was telling you earlier, like someone that's like a competitive guy like me, like talk about gamifying it. Like I had no idea that I'd ever be that geeky guy.
Is it a bike or is it the treadmill?
I got the bike. Well, I got the Echelon bike, which is the Costco version, which is like, way cheaper than the Peloton bike.
Okay.
And, I'm like, I
could picture him and Nsima getting all competitive
on
there.
Oh man, because it's like a video game. Like even because I don't do the live stuff, but like it's my name on there, Thomas Delauer, that's popping up, and I guarantee you, there's people that are gonna be like, that's Thomas Delauer. So if I suck on it, that's my whole business could tank. So like, I'm like, I'm gonna get on the bike. I'm like, Amber, don't bother me. Our income depends on it.
Yeah,
and
this is why I love you. You're totally out of your mind, by the way. But your attention to detail is I think why your YouTube and stuff has been so popular.
Yeah, but I mean, I guess. I mean, but it's also crippling, but I try not to let it paralyze me.
Right. You shot a video one time, and this is how I knew you were my boo forever. You shot a video of you eating at Starbucks. And then you were like trying to navigate the best way. And you like went over every tiny detail.
Was it the coffee thing?
It wasn't just coffee, although he's done amazing stuff with the coffee stuff. But this was more like talking about the food at Starbucks. And he was talking about that's the video. And he was talking about the egg white. The egg white egg bites being like just a smidge better, he thinks, in his opinion, than the full egg ones, because the full egg ones have fat in them, and because they have fat in them, it might have like exogenous estrogens or something like that. And I was like,
I think it was vice versa, but yeah, it was.
Oh, there you go.
It was about the it's like, the white is pure albumin, so that there's kind of an argument that like, the white is just like you're just getting protein, you're not really getting the nutritional value out of it. But the Starbucks protein bites, or the big egg bites, are they have a bunch of potato starch in them. So there's like 8 grams of carbs in those suckers, which is weird. Like, so there's what is that company, the Three Bridges, or the company that sells them at Costco?
Yeah.
Those egg bites, they don't taste as good as the Starbucks ones, but those are
missing that potato. Yeah,
that's funny.
Yeah, that potato starch.
I was like, damn, he just went over this so precisely. This is awesome.
I remember being so bummed. So my wife and I have been watching you like way before I ever was like working here. But I remember watching one where you went into like, I'll just say a Whole Foods, and you're breaking down like all the healthy like section things and how like we basically could eat none of it. And I'm like, well, fuck, what am I supposed to do now? Like I thought I was doing the right thing. So that's hilarious.
Someone commented on the video that I did with Lane Norton, and Lane Norton reposted that on his channel, and it actually exploded more on his channel than my channel, probably because people on Lane Norton's channel know who Thomas Delauer is, because he's flamed me a few times.
Yeah.
People on my channel don't necessarily know who Lane Norton is, so it's like on his channel it exploded, it blew up. One of my favorite comments was like, I have some more respect for you, but I still hate you because you gave me anorexic tendencies. And, and I was like, okay, I sincerely felt bad. And then I realized like, I think he was kind of just prodding, because he was just like, but anyway, the point is that yes, sometimes I've scrutinized things so much to the point where people are just, I realize that like my audience isn't necessarily going to be looking at things with the microscope that I look at, and they don't necessarily cross-reference like all my videos in the right way, right? So which is hard when you're pumping out 60 videos a month. Like you better watch every single video, because otherwise you're going to miss something, right? The point is that like, yeah, it almost makes it seem like nothing is edible. But what I do is
So funny.
like, I'll have
That's why I like fasting so much.
That's what it was like though.
Yeah, it's like, glass of water and an air sandwich, but make sure that it's, this water. That's
I don't remember any of the ingredients, but you would be like, this one's actually pretty good. And you'd read them off and like, but it has like maltodextrin or some shit like that. Yeah. It was like, fuck, okay, I can't have that either. I'll go have some water.
I think
and oxygen.
You want to just let people know that we've invested in a fasting restaurant that we're going to be releasing pretty soon.
Yeah, margins are incredible. It's with like looking at ingredients and kind of breaking those down and stuff. People have to take it for what it's worth. Like it's there to be able to explain like, hey, this is not necessarily the best. But then there's certain things where I'll be like, yeah, absolutely do not eat this. Like I think this is terrible. But everything should be kind of with that Thomas Delauer sort of twist to it, right? Like this is just because Thomas Delauer says it's just like this wouldn't fit into my diet. It doesn't mean that you can't eat it and that you're going to keel over dead. It just means like this is a no-go in my list. And it's but I've realized that not everyone thinks about this stuff the same way that I do. Like I realize that I have a lot of responsibility because people, they really do hang on my every word. And I guess I come from this background where like, I've always had to kind of justify myself. I've always had to be able to have to explain myself. I've always, I was either the skinny guy or the skinny kid or the fat guy. Right. And it was like, never really super good at any one thing. I mean, I would do pretty crazy feats like run a marathon. I backpacked the John Muir Trail from Yosemite to Mount Whitney when I was 12 years old, 2 times. And I've done cool shit and I've done mostly endurance stuff, but was never like world class at anything. And so I guess I'm still adjusting to the fact that people like really trust me and really listen. And when I say avoid maltodextrin or something like that, they take it to the bank. And I'm like, I am paralyzing people with that, and I have to be careful. I still don't think maltodextrin is good, and I definitely highlight it in videos, but I need to reel back the demonization of things because it wasn't to be gimmicky. Like it really wasn't. Like it wasn't to be gimmicky or isn't to try to like get clicks. That's not what I'm into. Like, and people that have watched my channel for a long enough time know that that's like, I'm not a clickbait guy. That's not what I'm into. I like to explain. I really do. And I like to explain how something works in the body. And I sometimes over justify the reasoning behind it. And so I just, it's like publicly, like people need to take it for what it's worth. Like if you're consuming like ridiculous amounts of maltodextrin, it's probably not good. But if you avoid maltodextrin altogether, you're probably not going to be eating much because it's in just about everything, right? So looking at the ingredients, it's just like you have to just understand what is good, what is bad, keep a little bit of a tally of it, and just don't overdo it, and just keep a conscious eye for those things.
Yeah, has some of the YouTube and like YouTube comments, along with being an influencer and all these things, have ever like truly hurt you or hurt your interaction with your family at all because maybe you were doing it too much, or the comments were super damaging and hurtful? Like have you run into stuff like that?
Oh, the comments can be interesting because they, I always try to take the high road. Like I try to, comments that I do see, like I'll reply with a sophisticated response and always understand that people are usually coming from a place of hurt, not coming from really being vindictive. It's usually coming from either a place of jealousy or a place of where they feel wronged by something. Or I had someone yesterday that posted a comment, I think literally said like, "You are so stupid because you said that Catalina Crunch is okay and it spiked my blood glucose." Let's reverse engineer that comment for just a second. Okay. You are so stupid because you said that Catalina Crunch is good and it spiked my blood glucose. So I am literally stupid because I didn't know how you would respond to a food. So out of 3 million subscribers, 20 million views a month, I didn't know that it was going to spike Jane, not literally her name, Jane, right. Jane Doe's. It's interesting. And I replied and I killed her with kindness. And I said, what's interesting is when I wear a continuous glucose monitor, I have found that sometimes Catalina Crunch spikes my glucose too. It's really interesting. Perhaps there's some cross-contamination with something in their lab or in their food facility or something, but other times it hasn't. And, for the record, I've never had a fiduciary responsibility with that company. I've never actually promoted them. I've mentioned them in videos. And they
got delicious products, by the way.
It does taste good. And I actually don't get kicked out of keto with it, but occasionally it does give me a spike. So who knows? And she replies like nothing ever happened. Like she never called me stupid. She's like, "I really appreciate your videos so much. Like you've helped me so much." And it sounds funny But the point is that this person just called me stupid 5 seconds ago. Didn't apologize for calling me stupid, but I killed her with kindness. And then the truth really comes out. Be like, you've helped me so much. But it really does tell you that this comes from a place of hurt. I use this as an example because she was genuinely like insulted by the fact that I led her wrong. And so the reason that these comments hurt me isn't because I give a shit that you think I have circles under my eyes. Like, I really don't. Like, whatever. Dude, like, I've been the march to the beat of a different drum my whole life. It actually affects me because I know that how they're interpreting something that I said actually led them astray and led them wrong. And that is the last fucking thing I want to do. So like, when I see that shit, it's like, shit, like, here's another one I got to clear up. And then I internalize it because I'm like, maybe I didn't do a good job explaining this. Because one thing that I need to do is I'm not a researcher. I'm not a scientist. I'm an articulator of complex subject matter. And so then I take that a little more personal because I'm like, I need to do a better job of explaining this. And, but now, then it gets to a point like right now where I'm just like, how much more can I explain things in extreme depth? Like, let me just almost have to take a step back and just say, do what works for you. You know, here's the science. Here's what I see. Do what works for you, but please don't take my word as gospel because it could lead to disappointment. And that's the last thing I want to do to you. But then again, it's like one of those things where, is it just the loud minority that you hear? Because most of the content that I put out is helping millions of people. And it's just the small minority that I hear. So I don't want to let that small minority dictate the direction of my channel. I just want to do what's true to my heart, right?
What about the like the small annoyances, like when you run a sponsored ad or something? Like, how do you like navigate not doing too much, but also, I mean, you got to make something out of it, right?
Yeah. How do you make money on YouTube?
Yeah.
Since you've been doing it
for sure.
so long?
I mean, I have zero problem with having sponsors because every single sponsor that I would ever work with is a product that I use or recommend or think that people would get value out of. I'm not a shabby business development person. I have a decent business background and I was in the private equity world before, and I know how to strike a deal, right? So if I come across a product that I like, I will reach out to them directly, me, not my team, me, because there's a little bit of a nice effect when the person themselves is reaching out because they like your product. Not only do I feel like, there's a cachet with that, but I feel like that way it's really making sure that the product is vetted. And then another thing with sponsors on my channel is I have thrown products to the side because I don't like the people involved with the company, or I don't like the interaction, because I really believe in character and I really believe in culture. And if the people running a company have poor values, it's only going to be a matter of time before the products do as well. They may start with good intentions, but it tends to, let's cut corners later on to increase our margin and, whatever. It's going to happen. So I usually look at the people. So I have zero apologies whatsoever for having sponsors on my channel because the products that I recommend are good. And I think people trust me. And if I put my stamp of approval on something, then it's great. And it's also, from a marketing perspective, it's conditioning. They have known from almost day one that every single one of my videos is going to have some kind of call to action in it. Whether that call to action is to buy a product or to implement something that I recommend, there is a takeaway. One thing that I'm very careful of, and I was not so good in the past, but I've definitely evolved in the last 2-3 years, is that the net impression of the video should never be by this product. Okay, you don't want the net. First of all, you run into a big FDA, FTC issue there. If the net impression of what you are talking about, if I'm doing a video talking about sugar and I'm trying to sell sugar cubes, you better be making sure that everything you say in that video has your T's crossed and your I's dotted, because that's the kind of thing where you just basically created a sales video. So if you're not like aggressively using the right kind of vernacular, the right kind of lingo, we haven't gotten to the stage yet where I think the FDA, FTC is like really coming down on this stuff, but it's going to come. Like, there's too much money being made from influencers. Eventually they're going to slap it down. So I'm extra careful, and I make sure that, like, if I do have a relevant sponsor that is overlying with subject matter, that I am very clearly disclosing that this is a sponsorship. And I have no apologies about that, because I feel like people understand, most logical people understand, that it is not a bad thing to have businesses think that you're good. And I come from an era where back in my day, I sound like an old man, it was a good thing if people wanted to do business with you. If people wanted to do business with you, it meant that you were good at something, and it meant that you were integrity driven, and it meant that your heart was in the right place. So yeah, I have brands that are knocking on my door, not just because I have traffic, but because they want my stamp of approval. That is the highest form of compliment. I shouldn't say the highest. I think the highest is like the individual person that approaches me and says I've changed their life. But from a business perspective, that's like, if I had them clawing at my door because I'm respected, I take that to the bank because that's good. So I monetize YouTube with that strategy because it also makes a lot more sense for me because I did a video breaking this down before, sort of the economics of YouTube. There's like 3 different ways in my eyes that we could make money on YouTube. Way number 1, via AdSense revenue, typical revenue strategy where YouTube pays you money for ads being overlaid. The Wild West days are over. People getting, $500,000, $1 million checks, unless you have a massive channel, unless you're like Mr. Beast. Like, it's not like it was 10, 15 years ago. It's not. Trust me, people think we're making all this crazy money on YouTube. The AdSense numbers aren't what you think they are. I can tell you that. Okay. In order to make that revenue model work, you need to go for clicks and you need to go for views. So what that means is that you are creating material that isn't necessarily what you want to create. You're creating material to get views. And that is fundamentally flawed because that is not your authentic self. So that's revenue model number 1. Revenue model number 2, a circumnavigating content machine that ultimately leads back to your own product. And there's nothing wrong with having your own product, but especially in the consumable space, we see it. Like, so you're telling me that everyone else is bad except for your product. How on earth is that an unbiased approach to nutrition? At least in the nutrition world, this applies. I think there's other categories that it wouldn't apply. In the nutrition world, that's tough, right? So if you're not having sponsors, if you have your own product and you're not having sponsors and everything comes back to your own products, what are you, God? So it's just, that's not how it works. So for me, it makes so much more sense to be like, I'm going to have multiple different products that I work with, not in like the traditional influencer capacity, like where like, hey, these are my like LED underwear, check them out. Like, swipe up. Like this much
red light underwear.
Yes, exactly. So it's much more like, I would rather have a diverse amount of brands that like to work with me. And because
that you also back up, like you think they're good shit.
And think about it like this. Let's say I use this analogy, right? Let's say I wanted to do a video about mud flaps on my truck. Okay. There's like 17 people that would actually want to watch that video. Okay. Let's be realistic. Maybe 5,000 people that would want to watch a video about the benefits of mud flaps on my truck. If I was going with revenue model 1, that would never work because I could never make videos on that. I would never make money because I'd make like $30. Okay. But by being able to go out and reach out to a mud flap company and say, hey, mud flap company, can you sponsor this video that I really sincerely want to make on mud flaps because I'm passionate about mud flaps? And they're like, well, yeah, that's a very like niched video about mud flaps. We'd love to pay for that video. I just got paid to create a video I want to make. So by having my revenue model, it allows me to create those esoteric topics that may not get extraordinary views, but are helping that niche group of people that really want to see that content rather than just some generic bullshit. Like, so for me, it just makes a ton of sense to say, I would rather have a sponsor promote or support this content, even if it only gets 5,000 views, because this is something that needs to be said. Hope that makes sense. I feel like it's allowed me to have the breadth of content that I have.
That's awesome. Does the sponsored, like we'll say the sponsored company 1 is going to get today's video. So does that product dictate what the video is going to be about? Or do you kind of have the content already recorded and then you like, oh wait, that's right, this is a perfect spot for that?
No, I don't plug and play. I try to craft subject matter in a delicate way, so that it works without seeming contrived, right? It's it's difficult to do because you want that, again, like I said, that net impression. You don't want it to be buy a product. You want to extract value from the conversation. So I have different, models. Like
when you did a commercial for the Slingshot.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And you talked about, you're like, you guys know that I do this movement, and you talked about bench pressing, and you went over like all kinds of different stuff on bench pressing. And then you also mentioned the slingshot, but it wasn't like, hey, this is the best product, and I gained 75 pounds on my bench, and you need to get one today.
Yeah,
and here's
it was
how
like,
to get it.
I think it was like 5 things to improve your bench, and one of them was using your product. You know, and it's something like that. Or if I'm doing a video talking about different forms of protein or something like that, that might be a good integration for ButcherBox, something like that. As long as you're transparent with the fact that it's a paid promotion, then you should have no shame or apologies for making an honest living, right? Like if there was some other like sneaky way that I was trying to make money, then it would be bad. But like I take, you know, no issues and have no apologies for like respectfully disclosing that this brand has supported my business, helped pay my employees, helped keep everyone on staff so I didn't have to fire people during a pandemic, helped keep everything thriving, and put food on my table at the same time. Like, why on earth is that effing bad? Like, what world are we living in where like everyone expects everything for free? Like, and you don't need to, so with that, now I've seen, 3 years ago, when I went from having no sponsors on my channel to having sponsors on my channel, it was like, oh, you sold out. It finally happened. Like, oh, boo hoo, you have to skip through 15 seconds if you don't want to watch it. Like, it's not the end of the world. But the biggest thing was that now, read the comments and it's so different. Wow, your videos have changed me, and the products you've recommended have changed my life. And because of Thrive Market, or because of Element, because I've been able to fast better. Element has made it so now I can get through my fasting. Guess what? I actually added value to your life. So the people that are pissed off about it, those are the people that are what are called energy suckers. They just want to extract a little bit from your content. And you know what? That's fine. I hope you learned something, but they're not the people that are actually really going to make a long-term change from your content because they're not open to it. And you have to look at everything with an open mind. But the funny thing is now you see more and more channels are doing sponsors. Why? Because as YouTube cranks back how much money you make from YouTube, they're like, oh shoot, how do I keep this going? Because if you're running a big channel, you have a lot of overhead. I have a lot of overhead. If you're doing it right and you're also stimulating the economy by hiring employees and doing a good thing for the world and the country, then you're going to have overhead. And if one of your revenue streams starts to go down, then you do the right thing to maintain cash flow and you double down on another area. So now people are experiencing that and they're like, oh shoot, I'm not making as much money with AdSense revenue. I guess I need some sponsors unless I got to start cutting some heads and getting rid of people. So
was there ever a video that like kind of launched everything? Was there ever like one video in particular where you were like, oh shit, like, I need to, I need to continue this and really push harder on it type thing?
In terms of
like a viral video or a video that like, or has it just been I think you said you do 60 videos a month, like
40 to 60, a lot.
Yeah.
Sheesh.
So has it been like just the simple fact that you're super consistent with content, or was there some like banger of video where you're like, I need to do this like more full time?
It's a good question. It definitely was a consistency thing, I think, at first. And it still remains a consistency thing. That's one thing that I do feel like, there's always these. Now I have enough data to look at over the last 5, 6, 7 years where I know the seasonal ebbs and flows, things that used to like kind of really fuck with my head, like really used to mess with me, be like, every November and December, I should know by now that views take a lull, in the health and fitness world. Like they just do, especially on YouTube. But for the first couple of years, it's like, oh my gosh, like it's ending, it's over, it's finally done, that was a good run, Amber. Let's go find a good cardboard box because we're done, So, but now like understanding like consistency really just makes me see those patterns and realize that you're always going to weather the storm if you're just consistent. Algorithms are weird and you cannot really manipulate those, but one thing that you can always manipulate, and I shouldn't say manipulate, but stay steady with, is just the quality of content and the quantity of content that you put out. I definitely noticed that I've tried a lot of different things to test it out. I find that when I am simple and very just basic with my content, like long-term views are really, really good with that because people want simplicity, but it doesn't satisfy my existing audience, which is now conditioned to biochemistry. And it's like, if I don't put something out that's relatively complex, they're like, what are you, babying me? So and it's like this challenge to be like, now I have to like make things more complex, but that's off-putting to new people. So it's like a balance. So I've definitely found that there's like, I have to have this balance of really basic videos that kind of dumb down everything, for lack of a better term. And then I have to have still a couple days per week where it's like intense biochemistry, because that's where a good portion of my audience really likes. But there's 3 million subscribers on my channel right now. And I don't think there's 3 million people in the world that really want to like go into intense biochemistry. So I have to like remind myself of that, be like, maybe I don't have to always go super deep, but it's also like what I enjoy. I like going deep because how I understand things. But I would definitely say like what's tough is that initially the intermittent fasting topics just exploded for me because I was like right at the right time talking about it. Now it's so saturated. Those are actually not my top performing videos anymore. The old ones are, because they're evergreen videos that are just, they're like the pinnacle intermittent fasting. Like I've got that one that's like 6 or 7 million views or something, or like, you know, that's like the complete guide to intermittent fasting. That one is always like ranked #1 for intermittent fasting on YouTube and Google. It's like, those are like the flagship videos. So based upon that, you would think, oh, well, you should do more videos just like that. But now it's so saturated with intermittent fasting, unless I'm coming at it from some like esoteric angle, they don't perform as well. What seems to perform really well is just, you always want to look for that balance of search engine optimization that is like doing really well with SEO, something that's got a high search volume without a lot of competition. So finding that number, finding that balance is tough to grow a YouTube channel. It's like you have to find something that has, okay, what is searched quite a bit? What has a good search ranking, but what is not super competitive yet? Because that's how, and usually what, you know, the search volume is going to kind of preclude the competition, right? So if people are starting to search for something a lot, that just means there's demand.
What do you use to like find that out, by the way?
I use a couple tools, but a lot of it is just, you know, kind of just keeping my finger on the pulse of the industry.
Okay.
And I feel like, you know, the more people you talk to, and you guys are at a great advantage with using a podcast because you get to talk to people, like, right? Like you can kind of think about, I see where things are going. And you need to always be kind of looking around a corner that you know something is around that corner, but you don't know what yet, but you have to be, you know, taking some chances on what is around that corner. And Mark, you're really good about doing this. I feel like you're always a little bit ahead. And I feel like you take things that people say, I see you do it, and you make it work for you, and then you think ahead with it. And you're probably doing it subconsciously. And it's kind of what I do too. Excuse me. So I think that that's a really good way to do it. There's one that I use called vidIQ, which is, you know, a good one. Hang on. You might want to cut this out after cough. Don't worry, it's not COVID.
It might be.
Yeah.
Omicron.
Yeah, so vidIQ is a good one because it kind of breaks the competition part down.
Yeah.
Have you also used TubeBuddy?
Heard of it?
I've heard of it, but we use, I use vidIQ.
Yeah, vidIQ I think is better than TubeBuddy for sure.
Okay.
Yeah. And then what about like, I mean, cause you're learning stuff all the time, as you know, we all are being on this podcast, but do you circle back and kind of like, I don't want to say recycle, but just like a certain topic that did really well, like, fuck, okay, I'll probably hit that again in like 6 months or anything like that. Do you do stuff like that?
Yes, to a certain degree. And always like with ever evolving research too, you know, so like I can handle a topic that is different. Sorry. What's going on? I can handle a topic in a different direction, in a different way, with different material, and just using a slightly different title too. Because that's the thing with the YouTube algorithm, is it's so, not all 3 million subscribers are seeing a video.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. So if I know that only 100,000 people are seeing this, then I know there's a good chance in 6 months, if I do a very similar video, a different 100,000 people will see it. And you got to remember, it's about impact, like not about one video. So one of the most important things I did was stop being so obsessed and married to the beauty of one piece of content, because I got into it because of creativity, because I'm a creator. I like to create. I wanted to build a production company, but I was too sucky for Hollywood. So I built my own production company. So I would like sit there and be like, this video is glamorous. It came out so beautiful. It's so well, it's so tasteful. The production quality is great. The lighting is perfect. It looks so good. Then I'd be disappointed if it only got 50,000 or 100,000 views, and you get down on it. Then you realize, no, I'm actually after impact. So if I take that same video and I just articulate it in a slightly different way and release it again 6 months later, even if it has a slight overlap, first of all, I highly doubt people are going to get pissed off about that if it's 6 months down the road. But the impact that it's making on the other 95,000 people, that's what matters. And also, it's a numbers game too. Like, so it's like, eventually you do that enough times, one of them is going to blow up, and one of them, and some of them are not. 9 of them aren't. It's a failure thing. It's like people think like they get so married to their content. Like, it's okay to fail. Like, you're going to fail. Like, most of your content will fail. And not every video is going to be a blockbuster. And YouTube even is very clear about that. Like in the YouTube partnership program, like they like kind of set it up with like this hub hero content, like where you have certain content. This is just your baseline content. Look at how a media company would run. Look at how a TV company would run. Look at how a channel would run. Why do you think they have prime time slots, right? Because they put their money on the fact that those are going to perform. Sometimes they don't, but a lot of times they do. And then they say, okay, well, this is off time. We'll do reruns here. We'll do regular videos here, whatever. Thomas died on the Mark Bell. So,
in a lot of your content, like actually all your content, you go deep on the biochemistry. So I was curious, like, how did you educate yourself on that? Because you didn't like go to school for that. That's something that you taught yourself over time, and you don't hear that often. So what was that process?
Yeah, and I'm proud of it. And that's why it's like, it's sometimes off-putting when people are like, I get contact form submissions that'll come through. It'll be like, I really like what you're saying. I love everything you're saying, and it's worked so well for me. I've lost 50 pounds, but I have to ask, what's your education background? And I'd say, most of the time when I reply and say I'm just a dude, most of the time they're like, oh, it's a bummer because I really liked your information and it worked really well for me.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I'm like, what world are we living in? My background's in psychology, but I was I was in essentially, I'm going to make it very simple, but I was in kind of the private equity healthcare world and ancillary lab services, which basically meant that I was like involved in like biomed sales and stuff like that. So I had just by very nature, my ability and my gift was the ability to like articulate how devices worked in the body. So I learned that by being around phenomenal doctors that were good at what they did. And since I was in like the lab services world, we were looking at, salivary cortisol testing, looking at these things and selling them to physicians and practices and hospitals and, physician-owned hospitals and all these things. And being able to explain like mechanisms and different blood panels and different, like you learn a lot really fast. Yeah. So, and I realized within that I got really good at that. And I was really good at relating to the physicians and being able to understand that and them to understand me, developed phenomenal physician relationships, and realized that I already had the knack for nutrition with going through my own transformation. And I had enough, nice, good people in my industry that were like, dude, you're really good at this. Like, and physicians themselves that would say, how many hours of nutrition information we would get? We would get practically no education in nutrition, and they'd be like, Thomas, you're like really good at explaining this. And like, this is coming from doctors. And I realized like, wow, this is actually my gift. Like, I'm not a doctor. I'm not a biochemistry major. I have the ability to articulate it. But the thing that separates me from the others is I'll put my money where my mouth is and I'll do it myself too. And I want to be a doer, right? So being able to do that and being able to experiment, but then be able to rationalize why it's potentially working is a really powerful thing. So that's how I developed my ability to explain things. I think people really undervalue the ability to communicate that kind of stuff. Like, someone like Joe Rogan or someone like a great host, for example, like he talks about some pretty high level stuff that he's not credentialed in, but people listen to it, hundreds of millions of people, because that is a gift for him to be able to extrapolate that data out of people. That is a gift. And I have no apologies. This is confidence. I'm confident in the fact that like, I am happy with the fact that my gift is being able to take the work of amazing people and parlay it to people so they can actually apply it.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with that, but there's a subculture of people that think that like this highly just only academic world that think because I don't have a PhD after my name, that it's just not credible. It's like, I'm not trying to pretend to be a doctor. But it's funny the amount of comments that I get or emails that I get. Hi, Dr. Delauer. It's kind of funny.
Yeah.
When it comes to keto, what are some of the reasons on why? I mean, I guess you were probably part of it, but like, what are some of the reasons on why you think it like blew up so big just a couple years ago, and then also now maybe it has a bit of a decline?
Yeah, I don't know why it took off out of nowhere. It's funny because it's had been talked about like in the bodybuilding community for a long time, right? It just kind of took off out of nowhere, like 2016-ish. And then I'm trying to think if there was any specific call to action that made it explode.
Yeah, I remember there was like one of the most researched words on the internet for like maybe like 2 or 3 years.
Yeah, well, and here's what we have to remember. So if you were to go to trends.google.com and look at the trends, you'll see that to the naked eye, it looks like keto is on a decline. So there's been people talking about this, like, is keto dying? Is keto dying? No, it's reached somewhat critical mass is what's happening. So the analogy that I've explained is, think about it like this. If you're learning to drive a car, you're going to search how to drive a car. You're going to look because you're learning and it's new and it's something that you're trying to learn. Once you know how to drive the car, you're not searching for how to drive a car anymore. So that doesn't mean that for every notch that keto comes down on search indexing and for search volume, that doesn't mean that that's for every one person that drops off on search volume. It doesn't mean that's one person quitting keto. That means that's one less person that's searching how to do keto, because it's not that complicated. Keto does amazing things in the body, and I make it complicated because I want to dive deeper and deeper and deeper. But the basic fundamentals of keto are pretty damn easy. And once you've got it down, you don't need to be searching for how to do keto and this and that. So just because search volume is down, that doesn't mean the interest is down. It means new interest is down. So that means that as far as a growth model, growth engine, maybe it's not a good time to like try to like build something educational on keto. But I think productizing and stuff like that, I think you're still in a great spot. And I think that it's still gaining momentum. And I think it has more potential for a resurgence than it does going down. I think it might go down a little bit, but I don't think people are going to say that it's just gone for good. The thing that can hurt keto the most is kind of what's happening right now, which is you have keto influencers that are just like butchering the education on it and saying crazy things like, fat burns fat. And like, I get what you're saying, but that's not the big problem. The problem is like when you're discounting decades of peer-reviewed research to push one like keto agenda. And we're seeing a lot of that. That's what's going to be off-putting for people, because the more kind of spammy type stuff that is out there, the more that keto is going to get hated on. And I think if people were to approach keto as a tool in the toolbox rather than only an alternative, granted, it can be a perfect alternative lifestyle for people, like it was for me, until I realized that over time, it's just a better tool to use at times than it is to be like my alternative way of life. So that's not to say that doesn't work like that. But I feel like there's a lot of people that are kind of making it so that it gets some bad juju around it. I don't necessarily want to be associated with a good majority of the keto crowd. And when I say the keto crowd, like I love them and I appreciate the fact that they are big on it. But who I want to be associated with is the leading researchers with it, with Oxford, who's doing great research with it, with Dom D'Agostino, the real credible individuals.
Don't you think when it comes to keto that they're like, it's hard for me to put into words, but there does seem to be something like interesting and intriguing about it, maybe over other diets. But I don't know how to articulate it, but it just seems so different. I don't know what makes it so different, or why I feel that way necessarily. Well, I mean, I love the foods that are part of it because I like kind of like those kinds of foods that are higher in fat.
Yeah, I mean, for me too. That's like I've always been a bacon eggs kind of guy. But the biggest thing with keto that is pretty undeniable is the impact on the brain. So I think that network stability, ability for regions of the brain to sort of communicate, that's pretty pronounced in the evidence. And I feel so good mentally on keto. It's hard to, again, we discount that a lot, right? Like I feel very strongly that like, mentally I am just a better person on keto. And that's what keeps me with keto more than anything else. If that part went away, I don't know if keto is what I would like stick to all the time, because I don't think it's the holy grail for body composition. I think that it has its advantages, But as far as being like stricter keto, like getting ketone levels relatively high, it's all about the brain for me. Like that's just for doing what I do, to be able to articulate the stuff that I articulate and to be kind of thinking or speaking almost as fast as I'm thinking. That is where undeniably, like I work better with keto. So like, even if I'm not keto, I will take like the 3 days before I film, or 2 days, I can get into keto pretty quick. Like 2 days before I film, I'll go back into keto because it brings my brain straight. So like I almost never will be filming on a day that I had carbs, practically never. And some people will say that's like bullshit, you know, your brain on carbs, blah, 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 blah. Yeah, you know, tell that to me because that's how I feel. Like,
it's interesting too that it has like a prerequisite, you know, like you can't, you know, it takes a couple days just to even get into ketosis.
Yeah.
And for some people, like if they're first starting out and they've never tried it before, it might take them 2 weeks.
Yeah. Yeah. It's definitely, I mean, it's, I'm going to hold my thought on this analogy, this kind of metaphor thing for a minute, because it's really awesome. So I want to come back to it. So just remember the word train so you can remind me to come back to it. But back to kind of what you had said, like what is different about it is, I think we discount the fact that when we get like mental satisfaction out of something, we don't always recognize it and associate it. So when you take someone that's not super aware with their body and all of a sudden they're just like, I feel really good, but I don't know why. That's going to be something that is that big differentiating factor for them. Like maybe they've never experienced mental clarity before. And that is like, you know, Pavlov's law, right? Like it's Pavlovian. Like I feel so good mentally when I do this, I'm just unconsciously going to keep going back to it. So keto just is that way for people. It's like, it feels good, you know, and that's where I stand behind with it. And okay, so with the train thing, getting back into ketosis and stuff like that, if you take a train track and a train track, you know, goes into a Y, the train can go to the left or it can go to the right. And there's that big lever that you can pull, you know, so someone gets out of the train, pulls the lever. To the left is carbohydrate utilization. To the right is fat utilization. Okay. If you're always going to the left, always going carb utilization, then that lever is going to be pretty rusty. And when you do try to switch over to fat utilization, you're going to have to get some WD-40, you're going to have to chip away some rust, and you're going to have to pull that lever fucking hard. Mm-hmm. Okay. And that's going to make it so that finally that lever gets switched. Same thing if you've been doing keto for a long time. If you've been doing keto for a long time, your train's always going to the right, and the lever to move it to the left is getting a little bit rusty. But what happens if you do switch back and forth a lot? The lever is nice and smooth, and you can be dual fueled and you can move back and forth a lot. And so for me, I'm in keto a majority of the time, not a large majority, but like I said, 7-ish, 8-ish months out of the year or so. You know, it varies. But so most of the time by a small margin, I'm in keto, which means that I'm predominantly going to the right. You know, I'm predominantly driving down that train path, but my lever is still pretty fluid. I can move to the left pretty quick. And that means when I do go on carbs, I can go back to keto and be fat adapted pretty quick because my lever is not having to get a bunch of freaking WD-40 and all that stuff.
Yeah, I know you're enjoying this episode, but I have a question for you. Are you still dieting off of broccoli, chicken, and rice, and maybe tilapia if you want to spice things up? Well, it's 2021. We're past that. That's why we've partnered with Piedmontese Beef. Now, Piedmontese is an amazing company that has cuts of beef that are really high fat or cuts of beef that are low fat. So if you are dieting on a low fat diet, you don't need to resort to the weak bird of chicken. You can instead eat some beef, eat some steak, and still end up getting the results you're looking for. So, Andrew, can you tell the people how to get it?
Yes, you guys got to head over to Piedmontese.com. That's PIEDMONTESE.com. At checkout, enter promo code PowerProject for 25% off your entire order. And if your order is $150 or more, you get free 2-day shipping. Links to them down in the description, as well as the podcast show notes. Let's get back to the podcast.
So. Are you talking about like more in terms of like in an efficient way rather than just because like it's not like your body like is like super confused, like you just went from eating, you know, primarily fat and protein, and then when you switch to eating carbs, like is there like a real true problem there, or is it just not efficient?
No, I wouldn't say a problem, but it's called glucose intolerance. I did a video a while back. Because there was a paper that came out that was like, you know, keto. The paper said keto's making us diabetic. You know, it's like basically like that. So I titled the video that. And I was like, is keto making us diabetic? Because on paper, someone that is doing keto for a long period of time, you develop a short-term glucose intolerance. Glucose intolerance is basically like an extreme insulin resistance, right? So you're basically, the cells aren't using glucose very well. So glucose is staying really high because the mitochondrial machinery has gotten so used to using fats. Everything in the mitochondria has shifted towards the mechanisms used to break down fatty acids and acetyl coenzyme A and go that route, right? Whereas, anaerobic glycolysis, that whole process and oxidative phosphorylation going that route has taken a little bit of backseat because that wasn't the predominant. So in a way, it is, yes, it's efficiency because the body's always trying to maintain efficiency, but that inefficiency can become a problem. Just like in an insulin-resistant or diabetic individual, that inefficiency and insufficiency of insulin becomes a serious problem. So you don't make yourself diabetic. I think that was overreaching with that paper to say that, because a lot of the studies, at least in rodents, because it hadn't been done in humans, but the rodent model studies show that is reversed pretty quick. The insulin or the glucose intolerance that comes as a result of doing keto for a long time takes about 2 weeks before it's kind of reversed again. So you have a period of 2 weeks where your mitochondria, your cells just don't seem to use glucose very well. And I mentioned this on the Lane Norton interview on my channel, and he didn't really say anything about it. He was nodding his head like he agreed with that. And it is like, which is interesting because like maybe he agreed with it because it was sort of almost negative surrounding keto, and maybe it was easy for him to agree with that, but it applies the other way too. And I'm not saying that even to shame him on that. I'm just saying maybe it was easier pill for him to swallow to relate to that. But then with the same thing can happen with fats. It's the same with fat adaptation. If your body is so used to using glucose, it takes a while to readapt or adapt in the first place that mitochondrial machinery to use the fats.
This is why, like, for example, if you do quite a bit of fasting, it's easier to get into ketosis. But also, wouldn't it be beneficial just to adopt a diet that has a low amount of carbohydrates from a day-to-day basis? Maybe not every single day, but on some days. Because initially, when I started fasting, I did find that I went no carb for a period of time. When I brought carbohydrates back, I felt pretty tired. I was like, whoa, what's going on here? But as I just made that a part of my diet and kept it low, some days it's a little bit higher, some days I have none, there's literally not a shift really in the way I feel anymore. It's actually interesting when you said the mental aspect of fasting, or the more so the feeling of better focus. That's why I started doing fasting initially, so I could focus on the work I was doing on a day-to-day basis better. But now it's like I have that feeling. That feeling doesn't really ever go away anymore. I think it's partially because my diet is low carb, but I don't restrict anything anymore.
Yeah, that's a good point. You're constantly sitting in this like mildly deprived state. Your body's kind of adjusted to it, and rather than like vacillating back and forth, it's definitely makes sense. Because I feel like low carb versus keto is you kind of sit in a gray area that could be detrimental at first, but I do think that once you adapt to that, just that gray area, it almost puts you like, I think there's serious advantages to consistently putting yourself in like, and when I say deficit, I say that not in a literal caloric sense, but like exposing yourself to mild hormetic stressors. Yeah. And I think by like dangling the carrot a little bit with just a small amount of carbohydrates, it's like you consistently keep the cells like slightly conditioned enough for it, but they're still opting predominantly for fats, which is probably explains why you stay so lean, but you're still having enough like glucose availability to fuel, an animalistic workout, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's definitely it's a wild world with that. And I think that, again, individuality, comes into play too. And it's like epigenetic history and how you've trained going through life. Yeah. Again, I think a lot of it, again, comes back to your soccer history, my running history, things like that.
Do you track anymore? Like,
I do if I'm making some changes or if I just need to keep myself honest, on some stuff. And I will say, I talked about this with like the one that I like, Lane Norton's Carbon app is actually a pretty good app, for tracking, because it kind of gives you, even with keto, and this is not a plug, I just thought it was kind of cool. I don't know what they did kind of with the math there, but basically like even with keto, like I could put in my food and then it will kind of adjust and sort of give you a breakdown of, hey, here's where you should be if you want to lose weight. Here's where you should be if you want to gain weight. And it kind of has a whole system that's algorithmically kind of tailored with that. Yeah. So I feel like that's pretty cool. It's a pretty cool app. So I do that just to kind of gain insight based on my activity and things like that. No, the things that I track the most, because I know where I stand for the most part, my calories, I'm not increasing my activity extraordinarily or decreasing it extraordinarily. I generally know where I am week over week. So I try to like get a baseline. I know what's in a tablespoon of peanut butter. I know so I generally know where I am at the end of the week. The one thing that I do track like religiously is my steps. And I know Mark's huge on that. It's sort of, shouldn't say our relationship ever fizzled, Mark. I've always loved you. But the,
Did I go wrong somewhere?
No, but what rekindled sort of my my interest in a lot of your stuff is when you got big into the steps again, because I'm like, oh sweet, now you're speaking my language, because I'm like so big into that. And so yeah, I think that's the biggest lever that we can pull.
Yeah,
is just how much we're moving throughout the day. That non-exercise activity thermogenesis, that's like so big. And when it hit with me, like it's always kind of hit with me, but it hit with me big time last year. I took the kids to Disneyland. And I was like, after 3 days at Disneyland, I was like, holy shit, I'm so got so lean. What happened? And I wasn't eating park food or anything, but I mean, abstaining from like certain foods, because I was just, in some ways it's easier because I'm just flat out not going to eat park food. So there's no temptation whatsoever, because that's like definitely a no-go. But then when I look back at my steps, I'm like 30,000, 35,000 steps, pushing a stroller. I was like, holy crap, walking 22 miles or something. I'm like this, and it didn't feel like I was doing it. We have such a warped perception of how many calories we burn during a workout, because the perceived exertion fucks with our head.
Yeah.
Because, we had a hard workout this morning. We were huffing and puffing. It was a good workout, right? So it's easy to think, because for that concentrated period of time, we were working so hard that we burned 700 calories. No, we probably burned 2, Sure, there's different metabolic things that come into play, but it is a much bigger lever to pull to just move throughout the day than it is to try to get the hardest workout possible. And it's like, we just become so mind fucked by that, because we're just like, oh my God, I didn't get a good workout in. Just go walk, especially for the regular person. I mean, we're all fitness people. We have different goals. Some of our businesses depend on looking a certain way and doing things. So there's different pressures there. And yes, but for the 99% of the population, like if you're pissed off because you didn't burn 500 calories to your workout, guess what? Like you probably wouldn't anyway. It's more about like how much you're moving throughout the course of the day. So that's the one thing that I track, because that can get very distorted, because there's a lot of days where I feel like I moved a lot and I didn't, and the numbers don't lie. I mean, sometimes the Apple Watch isn't always accurate, but it's fairly accurate. And then there's other days where I actually felt like I was pretty dormant and sedentary. I'm like, oh man, I actually got 15,000 steps today. I guess walking around Target with the family actually did add up. So it's like these things that you would never think about, because I know that I screw myself in my head, like with the whole workout mentality. It's like, man, like I didn't work out today, but I actually walked 15,000 steps around Target with my wife. And I actually net ended up actually burning more than had I not missed my workout.
Yeah. We got super sidetracked when Mark had asked you about like Slim Jims like myself fasting. So if somebody is trying to gain size, not necessarily just like a dirty bulk, right? But just trying to add some size, should they just completely avoid fasting?
No, I don't think so. I think because fasting is still really good for that insulin sensitivity piece that can help you with that. So I feel like, maybe doing it as like a reset, like 1 or 2 days per week, that way it remains, again, the anomaly. So you're like fasting like 1 day a week with like a 20-hour fast, and then, keeping the calories decently high. So what I found is that fasting operates as a nice little like stopgap to keep you from getting too fat when you're bulking, because that way you can add more calories. Point. Yeah. It's kind of like a quick correction, because nothing is going to like, it's almost like if you did a 24-hour fast, okay, let's say you're eating 3,000 calories a day because you're trying to bulk. Okay. And that would normally make you fat. Well, nothing is going to be more aggressive than taking one of those days and not eating at all, because that basically put you into a 3,000 calorie deficit. That's pretty significant. It's way easier than measuring out your food, if you ask me. So it's like you get all these growth signals for 6 days out of the week, and then you get one aggressive drop, keeps your insulin levels in check, make sure that you're staying lean and insulin sensitive. So I find that like people that are bulking, like it's a great modulator to not get fat with a bulk.
That's awesome. Yeah, I hadn't considered it like that, because like I said, with my experience, like I had no idea what was going on, but it was something similar like that, to where I would stop eating and then the hunger, ghrelin and all that shit would go up. But I was almost like I was able to utilize the nutrition that was coming in. So that makes a ton of sense.
Yeah, totally. And don't forget just to, especially on the days, well, if you're doing a 24-hour fast, it's kind of irrelevant, but as Mark always says too, prioritize protein, but it's tough because sometimes when you prioritize protein, it's so satiating, it's hard for muscle building because it's like, I remember when I was trying to put on muscle and I was, trying to cram 300 grams of protein a day. It's like, wow, actually, I'm not hungry. I don't want to eat, but I need to. So it's like, where do you draw the line? Because it's like, but you also, that's where it's really important to think, how many grams of protein do you actually need for your body weight? And just hit that number. Don't necessarily try to go above and beyond that number and get the rest from fats, really, so you can get the most caloric density.
Mm-hmm. And along with that, we've had multiple guests come on the show, Jay Tata. And,
he's awesome.
And a few other people talk about the effect of fasting and women when fasting.
Yeah.
How, a lot of them don't tend to tolerate it as much as men do.
Yeah.
What have you seen and what do you think they should just be careful of if they're trying to implement some fasting into their protocol?
Yeah, they just have a more complex set of systems that are communicating.
Yeah.
So with women, with men, if we shut down leptin response for a little bit and things like that, it can mess up some metabolic effects. But with women, leptin and estrogen, progesterone, follicle stimulating hormone, luteinizing hormone, all that stuff is closely tied together. So women have more at risk. However, women also respond better to hormone-sensitive lipase that's stimulated from adrenaline, from norepinephrine. So what that means is that the stress of fasting has been demonstrated to be more effective in women than it is in men when it comes down to oxidizing fat. So women have the ability to actually do better with fasting than men. The big caveat is if they overdo it, it's more damaging. So the big important piece is do not overdo it. It's like with women, if you're just starting fasting, I would say do a 16-8 method, 3 days a week, and stick with that until you really feel like you're ready. And if you start feeling like, your period's delayed or it's coming early or that's a good indicator that you may need to kind of back off a little bit. Mm-hmm. And some women are just not cut out for it. Their bodies just don't respond well to it. My wife actually is one of those. She's big time keto, but fasting just messes with her. And
that's just not eating for what?
She can do okay. She can do okay with that. She still follows almost the same pattern that I follow where whether it's a fasting day or not, I'm always at least doing a 12-hour fast. Mm-hmm. 12 hours is that's just normal, right? I just stop eating at 6:30 and I definitely at least won't eat until at least 6:30 the next day, usually. Yeah. So with women, it comes down to right when you're in your estrogen phase or your progesterone phase, you could get pretty granular with that. Mm-hmm. So during the progesterone phase of your cycle, it's interesting because during the progesterone phase of your cycle, you actually can burn more fat, but the problem is you're also catabolizing and breaking down more muscle during your estrogen or progesterone phase. And because you're burning, your body is in a much more catabolic mode in general.
Yeah.
So to the naked eye, again, you look on paper, you'd be like, you probably lose more weight by aggressively fasting during progesterone phase, but not necessarily fat. You would just lose weight. During your estrogen phase, you're much more naturally satiated. Estrogen kind of keeps your appetite at bay. That's why during the progesterone phase of a cycle for women, they get crazy hungry. That's right before their period. They're like, oh, I need to eat chocolate. And if you talk to women during their period, isn't necessarily like my wife. Let me just tell you all the gory details about my wife. No,
gory,
but it's basically, just using her as an example. During her period, she's really not that hungry during her period. She's more just miserable. It's uncomfortable and annoying. The hunger is the few days before the period. And my wife is always saying oh, I know when my period's coming because I start getting ravenous, right? I know when it's about to hit. And that's very common, right? It's not just my wife. So I'm not just calling her out on that. That's women across the board would be like, oh, I get so hungry. Yeah, because the progesterone kind of stimulates that, which is telling you to eat more. Yeah. So when you're fasting, even fundamentally, mentally, that is tough. Why would you want to fast when it's going to be miserable for you because you actually want to eat? Whereas during the estrogen phase, you're satiated. You have a lot more control. That's an opportune time to fast. So I usually tell women during the estrogen phase after your period, that's the time to maybe if you're going to push it a little bit more, try a longer fast, do it then. Mm-hmm. During the progesterone phase, maybe a shorter 12, 16-hour fast a few days per week. Okay. And just really lean into and kind of double down on the estrogen phase.
Yeah.
How'd you get into this whole keto thing?
It's what worked for me. Yeah. That was the biggest piece for me. I kind of became obsessed with inflammation. Actually, that was my big thing is, back in 10 years ago or so, I really just became fascinated with how inflammation worked. And one of the things that was fairly unanimous around most of the physicians that I talked to was keto for an anti-inflammatory purpose. And, given my wife's kind of history with Hashimoto and kind of inflammatory things, it just seemed like something that I wanted to do. So she and I kind of embarked on it together, helped her issues, and I lost a bunch of weight with it. So I had tried a few things. I did, I don't know, I did the typical kind of like counting calories thing, and it worked for me, but it didn't feel sustainable. Like, I'm not denying that when I went keto, I didn't cut calories. I'm sure I did. But one thing I liked about keto is I didn't feel like I needed to count. Whereas otherwise I was counting, I was counting, and that didn't feel sustainable. When I went keto, the weight was falling off and I wasn't counting. Not saying that I wasn't in a deficit, but I wasn't counting.
Because you were satiated more?
I think so, and I think but again, full disclaimer, this was 10 years ago. There were not a whole lot of like keto goodies out there. So by default, I was going back to like very whole foods with that. It was a lot of eggs. It was a lot of like good quality cheese. And there wasn't Catalina Crunch keto cereal, right? There wasn't that stuff. It was just, so it was nuts, seeds, peanut butter, almond butter, things like that. Lots of butter. I still liked ghee then. I was like way ahead of the curve with ghee. So that's kind of how it was really just, I liked it. And, again, just having people that understood it. The physicians that I worked around were fee-for-service docs. So they were like doctors that weren't necessarily influenced by insurance reimbursement. So they were like really into like cutting edge nutrition. Not that it was necessarily cutting edge, but they were like, hey, this is like what we've used with patients because they don't have to prescribe or subscribe to some particular notion.
Yeah, I think, when it comes to keto, it's like there's so many mistakes people can make. What are some of the common ones? I know you've done so many videos on this, so I'm hoping that the people that are watching this, I hope they dive into your YouTube channel. But what are a couple things that people kind of screw up when they're trying a keto diet?
Yeah, I think it's always good to like do a revised keto mistakes video like every 6 months anyway, because like we all learn so much and I catch so much crap for that because like you said that this was a mistake. Now this is a mistake. How many mistakes are there? No, we're like new mistakes, guys, because we don't live in the same era all the time.
It's cold.
Yes. It's, I would say one of the big ones is like freaking out about protein, like being concerned with protein is a keto mistake. Like when people are like, oh, if I eat too much protein, it's going to kick me out of keto. That's like so 2015. Like we did kind of think that early on. And even some of the research kind of suggested it, but that's not the case. Like if anything, protein is going to, at the very worst, it's going to maybe slow down ketogenesis, but it's definitely not going to kick you out of keto. And the long tail benefit of having protein is going to far outweigh potentially knocking you out of keto, even though it's not going to. It's, it might lessen it. I think one of the biggest things is when you're looking at blood work, not looking at your triglycerides is a big mistake. And I know I'm taking this higher level than the basic keto mistakes, but that's like the one thing you should really look at, because if your triglycerides are high on keto, that's a good indicator that maybe keto's not for you, or maybe you're reaching some level of like malfunction, because the triglycerides are the storage form of fat. And if they're not actually going to the liver and forming ketone bodies properly, then those triglycerides are climbing and climbing. And that's not necessarily good for gaining weight, but it's really just not good for your overall health. Like, so if your triglycerides are high when you're doing keto, be careful, maybe take a break or at least lessen the fats. Another one that I would say is, it's kind of generic, but the electrolyte thing. I think that's
Absolutely.
Like, I went years without taking in electrolytes when I was doing keto, and people are like, oh, well then like if keto is such a natural good thing, then why do you need to add in additional things? Well, because in a lot of ways, like keto is kind of, I don't want to say it's unnatural, but it is kind of unnatural because we are like artificially kind of manipulating things by like consciously restricting a food that would normally be in our diet, right? So we're already making things more complex. So sometimes you have to embrace a little bit of complexity with it. As far as like my muscles being able to contract properly when I'm working out, like I thought it was a carb thing for the longest time. Like, maybe I need to have a little bit of carbs pre or post workout because I'm just like, I don't feel like the mind muscle connection's there. I don't feel like my muscles are working. And then for me, I'm fairly heavily muscled guy. So I found that like 2,000 milligrams of sodium between my pre and intra, like what I drink before and during, about 2,000 total milligrams of sodium, game changer. Like revolumized my muscle tissue. Felt like, and I feel like that would be, I think that gets rid of the whole keto flu thing altogether. I think the biggest reason of the keto flu is a massive change in your electrolytes that's making you feel wonky.
You know, one thing I'm really curious about too, as far as, I guess, performance athletes when it comes to a lot of this, is what other things do you think that individuals who are really deep into the cardio side of thing can take advantage of if they're trying to do keto or low carb, when they're not just trying to lose body fat when doing any of these diets? What do they need to add in, if anything? Because I just didn't start this to drop body fat. I wanted to try and improve my performance, and it has increased over time. Yeah. But there's a lot of athletes that are like, there's no way I can fast, or there's no way I can do low carb or keto if I'm trying to gain muscle or improve running or jujitsu or any of those types of things. Yeah, that's common, because it's almost like, in some ways, it's great for when you're already there and you've reached this point, and for maintenance, but to achieve a different level. Yeah. I can't go into like a whole lot of detail, but I mean, like, I work with, a lot of the military and special operations, and keto is a chunk of that, right? Because it's like, okay, well, obviously this becomes very important with how do we still maintain performance? And it's the same kind of thing. Like when I work with like a professional athlete, it's the same kind of thing. It's like, that is so important to be able to get better. And I will say that you definitely have to become more targeted with your approach. Yeah. And that's literally why it's called targeted keto. So it's kind of doing what I do, like where I sprinkle in carbs sometimes post-workout, or I'll sprinkle in carbs consolidated to a specific period at night. When you've been doing keto for a while, like, you have to get through that fat adaptation phase first, but then you'd be surprised, like, if you're doing a lot of athletic activity, you'd be surprised at how many carbs you can take in without kicking you out of keto. Yep. So I think that that's the thing, is like, you don't need to just constantly be in crazy high ketone levels. If I am training for 2 hours, you can bet your bottom dollar I can have like 100 grams of carbs and still be registering. I'll kick out of keto for a minute, like maybe a couple hours, but then a couple hours later, I'm right back in it. Because why? Well, my muscles are saturated with that stuff. They're sucking it right up. So it's all relative to your activity level. So for performance keto, it's about having just the right amount of carbohydrates to offset the workload that you did. So you're providing your body with carbohydrating backload for that training that you did. So it's like, if I trained and I did a full body load where I was like really depleting glycogen levels, then it comes down to really getting to know your body and how many carbs you can get away with, that tolerable upper intake. It's like, what is my threshold for carbohydrates before I spill over? So yeah, I mean, I've gone as high as like 150 and still been in ketosis by the end of the day, which sounds like a lot of carbs, but like, it's really, 150 is really not that much. And it sounds like a lot to a keto person because they're so accustomed and acclimated to 50 grams at the most. Like 150, are you crazy? It's like 2 bowls of oatmeal. Like, that's not that much. So not hard to offset that workout with carbs. So that way it's like, you're conditioning the body to be able to be repleted properly, but then you're still getting the benefits of keto, because the majority of the time you're still in ketosis, which especially for like that's good for like a hybrid athlete. For like endurance athletes, it just takes like some conditioning. I think endurance athletes can actually thrive keto because it lends itself quite well. I know a lot of the triathlon community is getting into that. Some of the top marathoners are doing it. So it definitely applies there, and they don't even, ever add carbs in. They just stay strict keto, because over time your muscles will learn to adapt to keto and be able to still store glycogen from pathways like gluconeogenesis, where extra protein or the glycerol backbone of a triglyceride is broken down and used as a carbohydrate store. And do you think it's that important to be tracking your ketones? Because there's a lot of people who are consistently, just like Mark said, chasing ketones all the time.
Yeah, I think, so it's not a bad thing, but it's one of those things where it's going to mess with your head, because like for me, my ketone levels are never that high because my body's adapted. We talked about this a little bit before the show, but like it's efficiency. Like, why would your body produce a bunch of something that it doesn't need? Okay. If you flip that on its head and you think about glucose, if you were to like, having high levels of ketones is like saying that you want to have high levels of glucose. Just because ketones are fuel doesn't mean you want more of that fuel. Just like glucose is a fuel doesn't mean you want more of that fuel. You want enough to show that you're alive and to sustain life. just like you want enough ketones to sustain life. But what I need in the way of ketones is different than what you might need in the way of ketones. I'm so keto adapted, my cells are like, oh, we know exactly the signaling pathway. We know exactly how much to create. So the liver is going to pump out X number of ketones because I've been doing it for so long. It's trying to find the right number. It doesn't want to produce extra. That's not the goal. The goal is for the body to produce enough ketones to sustain life and to give you energy. Once it has that dialed in, you can't expect your ketone levels to go super high because your body's found its efficiency. So people find over time their ketone levels go down, and they think they're failing. I'm like, that is a good thing. If you know your diet's good and you know you're not like munching on cereal and stuff, then as long as you're doing the right stuff with your diet, then nothing's wrong. It's doing what it's supposed to do.
Yeah.
So yeah, but measuring ketones, especially in the beginning, can be very helpful just because it gamifies it and gives you something to track.
What about overdoing fat? A lot of times when people start getting into the diet because they might be trying to chase ketones, they're consuming like large amounts of fat. Is there still some worry? And I get questions all the time about heart health and lipid profile and all that kind of stuff. So what are some of your thoughts when it comes to is it something that people should be mindful of, like how much fat they're consuming?
Yeah. I'll cover just from a body composition piece first. I mean, we have to remember the basics that fat is 9 calories per gram, carbs are 4 calories per gram. So, if you go over this much with fats, it's going to do a lot more damage than going over this much with carbs in just a grandiose, global setting, not necessarily keto or not. It's just no matter what kind of diet you're doing, extra fat is still more calorically dense. So you can't eat unlimited fat bombs because gram for gram, you're going to gain more out of that fat bomb. So, but there's a complex situation with insulin and stuff like that. So that's arguable. But the fact is that if you're on keto, no matter how strict a keto you are, if you eat 5,000 calories in fat bombs, it's not going to magically disappear. It's going to go somewhere. So yes, we still need to be aware. And this, I catch so much flack for this, and it's simply a misunderstanding because it's hard to really articulate. But molecularly speaking, fat still stores easier as fat than carbohydrates do as fat. Okay, carbohydrates can spike insulin, which can slow down potentially some of the fat loss effects. Yes, I think we could see that, and again, it's not proven, but kind of see that insulin kind of stops that. But carbs, in order for a carbohydrate to turn into fat, it has to go through de novo lipogenesis, and it has to go through this whole complex pathway with 8 different steps where it's basically converting into malonyl coenzyme A and then it's fatty acid synthase, combining with the fatty. It is complex. Talk about an inefficient process. Whereas fat, if you overdo fat, it's already fat. So it stores and goes right into adipose and turns into a triglyceride essentially. Whereas with a carbohydrate, you're literally creating fat from a random carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. That takes a lot. So simplicity, the body is much more likely to store extra fat as fat than extra carbs as fat. But again, it's a complex situation because you can factor in insulin, so don't take that 100% to the bank. Point is, just simply put, the other side, fats are the dangerous. I still believe, and I catch so much flack for this, that excess saturated fats are probably not the best thing for us. There's some pretty strong evidence that fatty liver can definitely be triggered by excess saturated fat consumption. In addition to fructose, in addition to excess glucose, in addition to insulin resistance, in addition to trans fatty acid consumption. So, do you overdo saturated fat? I would definitely recommend not. The general rule of thumb that I typically say is 20% of your total fat intake should be coming from saturated fats. So if you consume 100 grams of fat a day, 20 grams of saturated fat is plenty. If you consume 200 grams of fat a day, then 40 grams of saturated fat is plenty. And the main reason behind that isn't necessarily for, cardiovascular disease or atherosclerosis or anything like that. So that's not even why. Point is that saturated fat doesn't have a whole lot of nutritional value outside of myelination and some brain support. It's more about if most of your fat calories come from saturated fat, you're missing out on all the benefits that can come from the monounsaturated fats, like the olive oil, the avocado oil, things like that I think have huge benefit and have been published in literature for the last 60 years. good, healthy monounsaturated fats. I know the carnivore community doesn't like it, but I mean, whatever. It's just, no one's going to agree on everything, but I'm going to go out on a limb and say that olive oil is probably pretty good for you. It's like, I'm a big fan of like a Mediterranean approach. And this isn't just Thomas Delauer talking. It's not just like me. It's just because of the nutritional antioxidant like value that you get from avocado oil, from olive oil, from other oils, other fats, not necessarily seed oils, but there's other fats. Like, if you're having so much saturated fat, then you're getting a smaller amount of that. And saturated fat just doesn't have a huge nutritional value. It's just kind of there, and again, it's not saying it's bad, but it's just, it lacks. It's like, would I rather eat a piece of white bread or would I rather eat a piece of like Ezekiel bread that has some nutritional value to it? If you give me the option between the two, right?
How much fat would you eat when you were tracking?
Usually like
how many grams or so?
150-ish.
So your protein was still higher than your...
Yeah, I'd say like between 150, 180. My protein, I would usually be 50-ish. And then I'd usually have like 10% of my calories coming from carbs, sometimes a little bit more. So my carbs are actually higher than most people that were on keto, simply because I was training hard and I could get away with more. So, but I'm also not opposed to having more protein than you are fat. Like, I don't think it's going to hurt things. Like, I actually recommend that people periodically cut their fats down and just kind of, switch it up on the system a little bit.
Probably get leaner.
Yep. Go high protein, kind of think of it like this. You're conditioning your body constantly to utilize fats as a fuel source. And then all of a sudden you rip away the fats. It's going to be looking for the fats. So where's it going to look for them? Out of your tissue.
You do a lot of stuff as far as performance is concerned. And I've seen a lot of things on your channel, like from sauna to red light stuff. And I'm curious, do you still use red light therapy? Do you still sauna? I'm curious about those things.
Yeah, like sauna, 100%. Like I just, I'm up at my home in Tahoe and I just have a sauna showing up there like tomorrow. And
sick. Yeah, like what brand?
So I have a Nordic at my Carmel house, and then my other home we have in Tahoe, I got an Almost Heaven.
Almost Heaven.
And it's not because I think I like Nordic, but Nordic is they're backward with like 16 weeks. Almost Heaven has them in stock.
Damn.
So yeah,
Okay.
and they're very, very similar. They're all using the same kip heater, the same heater. Mm-hmm. So it's really like, whose wood do you like more?
Okay.
It really doesn't matter much. So sauna, like I'm going to become like the Wim Hof of sauna, of heat, right? Like, whereas he's the Iceman, I'm going to be like the fireman. I am so obsessed with it. And like, I crank up my, I've rigged my sauna so that it gets up to like 240 degrees. So, I mean, I like it hot, like do it hot, get the hormetic stressor out of it. I feel like short stints at a high temperature, I feel are better. Just make sure you wear like a sauna cap when you go that hot, because it will fry your hair and your hair will start to you're like, why my hair's falling out? But it's like, it just dries out your hair. So that's why they make such things as literal sauna caps, because they're like these wool hats you put on. You look like a total doofus. But
my sauna will get really hot, especially if I pour some of the water in there. Like, it just goes fucking crazy. Yeah. It gets really, really it's like a steam, and it can burn you. I actually just throw a towel over my head.
Yeah, that works too.
It's like just everything just feels like it's frying.
Yeah. You don't want to fry your CPU, your whole, brain. But but yeah, like the heat shock protein effect, we could go down that rabbit hole for sure. The red light therapy, definitely love it. It's mildly inconvenient. Mm-hmm. I stand behind how well it works. Like, red light therapy is awesome for inflammatory responses, for antioxidant production in the body. So it's like helpful for that. Injuries, things like that. A lot of evidence there. It's difficult in the way that like you do have to commit to it, and you have to like sit in front of that light for 10 or 15 minutes, and you really do need to do it a lot.
Why don't they make one that goes like in your shower, one in your toilet bowl?
There's your next idea.
Get your butthole and your balls all full of red light therapy.
That's what I said, a ring light around the toilet bowl.
Yeah. Jesus Christ, what do we got to think of everything around here?
I think we do.
Good idea, especially for like.
But it should definitely be in the shower.
Shower makes sense for sure. Toilet makes sense too, especially if you're like, you got small kids and like the place that you hide is like when you go in the bathroom and close the door.
Thank you. Yeah, that's exactly my problem with the red light therapy right now. I'm like, I got to get my everything out there. It's like I got nowhere to go.
So I'm happy I have no kids yet. I can just stand there, just balls out.
Yeah, I can't go balls out.
What are you doing, Daddy?
Yeah.
Well, a kid doesn't call me that, but
trying to make it grow.
Was it like the Yeah. What's the movie where they talk about with the dogs? They're like, put peanut butter on your balls and the dogs let the dog look it up. What movie was that?
American Pie, maybe?
Was it American Pie?
Something like that.
Yeah. It just made me think of that. I don't know why my brain went there, but
You've been hanging out with us way too much already.
It's only been a day. My wife's going to come home and she's gonna be like, who are you?
Oh God.
How do the kiddos eat? I'm curious. He's about to be 11 months old, and then my stepdaughter's 13. She's doing really well. We actually did a really good job with her. But for my kid, my son, like I'm feeding him as much like steak and eggs as possible.
Mm-hmm.
Like, sometimes he's chewing and he's just like laughing, and I'm like, dude, you got to swallow that stuff.
Yeah.
But I'm just curious, like, how do your kids eat?
Yeah. I mean, we did baby-led weaning with both of them. We just...
What was that?
Baby-led weaning, where you basically, at a young age, like 3 months or so, you start giving them solid food and let them...
Got it.
Not dangerously solid food. Like, I'm not going to give them like, a piece of steak at 3 months, but like we were, let them pick and let them learn, because that's how they actually develop the ability to like masticate, not masturbate. But so
They'll learn that on their own time.
So that's like the ability to like really chew and develop that is very important for them. So we did that with both of them. And we felt that helped tremendously, because I think it also develops a palate. Like they learn like what they like, what they don't like, and it gets them the taste of food early on. So we did that with them. But then how they eat now, Tommy's 4, Emma's 19 months, or she'll be 20 months in a couple days actually. So she just like, she's weird. She just likes to eat like cottage cheese. Like she just like, we almost can't get her to eat a whole lot other than cottage cheese. She likes cottage cheese, and she likes broccoli. She loves broccoli. She loves broccoli with like nutritional yeast on it. Like it's just, so she's a little bit of an odd one, because she just like, is like, no, like we'll like make a nice, she'll be no, cheese. I want cheese. I'm like,
she's your daughter.
Yeah. I mean, she eats other foods. It's like she wants that. Tommy is, it's funny because he's like not, maybe it's just by watching, but he's not a big carb kid. Like he won't, like we've tried making him like mashed potatoes. We've tried even like mashed sweet potatoes. He's just like, nah, I'm not really into it. But you give him a plate of like broccoli and chicken, and he's wolfing it down. He definitely, we face any problem that a parent has, where I am convinced that kids have 2 stomachs. They have a snack stomach, and then they have their actual meal stomach. And their meal stomach is really small, but their snack stomach is huge.
Yeah. Oh,
snack.
yeah.
I want a snack. I want a snack. I want a snack. Okay. Oh, I'm not hungry for dinner. 5 minutes later, I want a snack. It's so that's just a psychological thing. So then it's like, okay, well, we can't feed the snack thing, because then they never want to eat their actual meal. But you also do have to kind of give them a snack, because they're growing and they're hungry. And I'm not going to be like, no, 4 hours between meals. Like... So
Nsima said meals at meals only, no snacks.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So
You're pricking their finger and checking their ketones and everything.
Yeah.
Right?
yeah, they're big fruit eaters. They both like fruit,
Cool.
A lot of berries. We don't do like super sugary melons or anything like that. So we do a lot of berries, a lot of strawberries, a lot of blueberries, a lot of raspberries. Big fans of that. I think that cottage cheese they both love cottage cheese. I do a lot of Bulgarian yogurt, which is like Greek yogurt, but lower lactose content and super high probiotic content. So there's like White Mountain and Trimona are like the 2 big Bulgarian yogurt companies. They're just taste so good. If I had to put it in a nutshell, they basically eat paleo with the addition of like cottage cheese and yogurt. Like,
They're eating pretty damn healthy because of the food in the house.
And that was what I said to you. Is like, we really don't restrict what they eat. They just eat what's available in our house. They don't have gluten because we don't keep gluten in the house. We could go down that rabbit hole. I don't feel good when I eat gluten. It doesn't take much to not make me feel good. I don't know why, honestly. They can look at lots of different mechanisms there, but we don't have gluten in our house. And my wife with her Hashimoto's, that definitely the gluten messes her up. So really there's not like bad options floating around. And when we do have like chocolate or treats laying around, it's usually like Chalk Zero or something that's like, like a keto kind of chocolate. So they get to indulge every now and then and not have a sugar high.
Yeah, you had mentioned Halo Top, right?
Yeah.
Do you keep that around quite a bit?
I wouldn't say I keep it around. So here's what we do. So actually, I'm much more of a fan of Enlightened than I am Halo Top, just consistency wise. Ice cream is my kryptonite. Like I love ice cream so much, and I could live off of it. What we typically do, we don't make the kids do this, but my wife and I, when we have our cheat meals, we call it a karma party, because there's this place down in LA when we were living down there called Karma Donuts. And they would make these like spelt flour gluten-free donuts with coconut, like made with coconut sugar and stuff. They taste so good, but the impact is just less. It's lower glycemic, and coconut sugar is a little bit better, but they're just effing delicious. And we would get those. And then what we would do is from our house to the store was 3 miles. So we're like, if we're going to do this, we're going to get our donuts and then we're going to walk to the store. We're going to get our enlightened ice cream from the store, walk back, and then we'll eat it. So we're kind of earning it. And we sort of indoctrinated our kids into that too. Like Tommy rides his bike. He's been riding a bike, 2-wheeler since he was 3, no training wheels. He's impressive with that. Kid's going to be a little BMXer like Josh Perry. He's awesome. And then Emma's in the stroller, right? And Emma doesn't participate. She goes to bed before Karma Party. So grow up, Emma. And then
Catch up, kid.
yeah. So
Can't hang with the big boys.
Yeah, exactly. So but Tommy rides his bike, and I'm not trying to you don't want to necessarily treat food as a reward, because then obviously that breeds, but you also have to that's kind of how I grew up a little bit, was my mom was just like, hey, we're going to go for a long hike. And you know what, after that, you reward yourself, have a milkshake, do something, because you also got to live. And what kid doesn't like ice cream? But I do want him to also learn that it comes with a calorie cost. And that's what I'm trying to teach him. But we do it in a very productive way. We get him excited. He wants to go ride his bike. Of course he does. And they'll be like, yes, hey, guess what? Cool. You see how hard you're working? Let's have some ice cream and let's do it together. It's not like we're just, and I think it's fun. And some people have given me shit about it. I mean, that's messing with their heads. And I don't think so at all. Not in the way we do it. We're not you go out and you run around the block 6 times if you want to have dinner. No, it's, hey, as a family, we're going to go walk, pick up ice cream. We're going to choose our flavors. We're going to come back and we're going to have it with our little, gluten-free donuts, and we're going to have a good time and we're going to enjoy life. And so that's kind of what we do. So yeah, and with the enlightened ice cream, I don't usually bother with the keto stuff too much. The keto one, I just get the regular one, because the keto ice cream is delicious, but it's so caloric. Whether you're keto or not, there's a lot of calories. So I just go for the regular Halo Top and just accept the fact that I might get knocked out of keto for a half a day.
Got it. And then, so you had mentioned, just now getting knocked out of ketosis. Is ketosis the ultimate goal? Should people be striving to get into ketosis and staying there forever?
No, I feel if it works for them, then yes. And if you feel like you're not depriving yourself, then I don't really see a huge problem with it. But I feel like you should, still dabble in carbohydrates now and then, just to keep your cells conditioned to using it. I'm a really big fan of just thinking how our, an ancestral way of living, who I really like? I don't want to go down a rabbit hole, but that Liver King guy is pretty awesome. Dude, there's some stuff that's kind of maybe out there, whatever, that maybe not real or maybe somewhat fabricated. But I think the overall message that he's sending, he's paleo 2.0, paleo 5.0. He's this is what paleo really is. So I kind of that's almost what I would say default to. He doesn't eat keto, but he also has periods of fasting, and he would probably go out and have some, he'd probably forage for some nuts and berries if he needed to. He'd probably javelin a hog and then whatever. So,
he would.
and then he'd
eat some carbs and stuff like that too.
Yeah. So I just feel I think long term, having some carbohydrates and just thinking how our ancestors would really eat, it's probably how our bodies are at a root level, designed to function. Small amounts of carbohydrates. I also feel seasonal eating probably makes some sense too. In the wintertime, it probably does make more sense to be more keto, right? Because that's what's more available. You might get some meat, very little seeds, very little fruits, very little
Why
veggies.
do you think people get so upset with someone like Liver King? Do you think that they feel they're somehow being deceived by something?
Are people upset with him? I know, what's his name, James or whatever, you talked about him.
Yeah, I hear people, people message me all the time and they're I think this guy's full of shit. And I don't know what they're I mean, they will question PEDs and stuff like that, but
yeah, they think
that's not ancestral, but yeah.
But that whole thing is just it's so hard to figure any of that out.
Yeah, why even? It's such a moot point. It's just I don't know. You can't really the PED thing. It's just oh God. It's just.
I mean, if he says he's natural, I mean,
whatever, dude. The guy he's building a hell of a following.
Whether he's natural or not, he's jacked. Looks
he looks pretty badass.
Yeah. His messaging isn't bad.
Yeah. And like, so I don't know if he's writing his copy or someone else is writing his copy. I get the inclination that maybe someone else is actually behind writing his copy, but who knows? I love how he talks in third person. I think that's fucking awesome. Like Liver King and Liver Queen.
He's got a great thing going on.
So like, but whatever, he's inspiring as all fuck. And that's what matters. And like, I just feel like, it's just bullshit. Like, why do people need to like, do they understand like this day and age that people might develop a persona, but if it's in good intentioned and it's doing good things, then what the hell? Like, he's not telling people to go like hurt people. Like he's telling like motivating people.
I'm not seeing a hook either. I'm not seeing him try to really sell you on anything.
No, and that's probably coming. I mean, it's going to come, right? Like it's just like happens with every social brand.
Eventually monetize it in some way, and that sounds great.
Yeah, I mean, it's like build the brand, and then I didn't monetize my channel for years, right? And it's just like so I mean, that'll come, and who cares? And when it does, he's probably going to kill it. Like it's probably going to rock. So, but I think that his way of eating is great. He strikes me as a guy that's like, I don't know, he's just got a very commanding physique. He's got just a unique look. He's definitely like you're scrolling, you see him, you can't help but stop, right? And the kinds of workouts that he does are exactly what I like aspire to be. Like, I love that. I love the idea of just carrying some heavy shit and like,
it's an untraditional workout. I mean, he does work out in a gym sometimes too, but he's like out carrying stuff and walking and stuff. It's more fun.
I don't think his body was built on that. I mean, there's clearly, I think, that's like me saying that the kind of workouts that I always do now, like just the hybrid types are what built my body. No, I mean, like big compound moves built my body, but it's, and I'm sure that was the case for him, but I don't know. We don't know what our ancestors really looked like from a muscle standpoint. We know what their bones.
They probably didn't look like much.
No, they probably didn't. Honestly,
I mean, they didn't hold that. I mean, you were saying in the gym earlier today that it's not like the body's not trying to get rid of muscle, but I actually kind of think that it does work on getting rid of muscle in some ways. I think nowadays, we have skewed things so much because of like we lift in the gym and we do these just like artificial exercise that we made up because we don't have to move as much. But it wouldn't have probably been of benefit to be really heavy, a long time ago, because the amount of walking and Nsima or myself or whomever, if we were all traveling together and trying to move and it's all speculation. I don't have no idea how the fuck people used to live, but I'm just assuming that we would be 30, 40, 50 pounds lighter, most likely just because of all the movement that it would require and all the hardship that we would go through.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, I don't know if we're designed to be, I don't know. It's
super
like,
jacked.
Yeah. or pushing extreme loads for long periods of time too, So yeah, it's a very good point. I think that, almost when I say unnatural, I don't mean PEDs. I just mean, the sort of unnatural level of muscle we carry now. It's like induced by artificial exercise. Yeah. Right. So like going to the gym is artificial exercise. I had a guy a friend of mine was like a business mentor, and his dad was a professional hockey player back in the olden days in Canada. And I remember him always telling me like, yeah, my dad would always say like, oh, you're going to go to the gym and do that artificial exercise. So even like
do all that bullshit,
even a professional hockey player that is like the epitome of like, you are going to do like an artificial sport per se. Their training clearly was more about just life. Like, no, just live a healthy, fit lifestyle so you can be good at your sport, less sport specific. It's kind of funny. So it's like, yeah, we're influenced by this artificial exercise that is very unnatural. So what we have created is unnatural. To be super jacked, whether there's PEDs or not, is kind of unnatural, because it's like, if you want to get down to the gritty of it, because I don't think that it was natural to be like, me lift big rock, me lift to get big bicep. Like, I don't, who knows? But
no,
so
that's true.
I mean, true. Where do you draw the line with natural?
What does your training look like?
It depends. If I'm in a heavy endurance phase, then, it's more skewed towards the running in that piece. So, but as far as like my lifting and that kind of thing, I'd say like 2 or 3 days per week, it's much more of like a hybrid, almost, I would say CrossFit style, kind of like what we did today. Not that it was CrossFit, but it's hybrid, a little bit of everything. I like to get my heart rate up. And then I'd say, a few days out of the week, it's much more like I do an upper lower split. So I like full body, but like if I'm running a whole lot, I can't smash my legs either the day before or the day after, because either I'm not going to run good or I'm going to be already obliterated from running. So, and that kind of ties in closely with like my fasting. If I ran a lot on a fasting day, then I don't recover, feel like kind of crap the next day. So yeah, so I usually like alternate. So like upper, lower. And then 3 days out of the week, 2 to 3 days out of the week, it's going to be more of like a functional style day. And then the running is just a constant. And that's the thing that modulates. You know, now I'm doing more of like that bike and stuff like that. I've got, you know, L4, L5, L5S1 ruptured discs. So those are.
How'd that happen?
That was an old leg press injury.
Ooh.
Yeah. That we've all kind of seen before, right?
So, taken out Ronnie Coleman style.
Yeah. Well, that, you know, the funny thing is that like happened when I was overweight and it actually didn't bother me that much. Right. But what happened was, and we've all experienced this, it was shortly before my son was born. So 5 years ago, deadlifting, warming up 135. Always happens with the warm up. Like, it's so funny. I talk to so many people. It's like, yeah, it's like, I guess you're just not set up for it and you're not, you know, warming up. You know,
You're taking it easy. You're not treating it like a heavy lift.
Yeah. And you know what else is interesting? I mean, I don't want to, this is super weird, the biomechanic piece, but, you know, you sometimes have to lift with your own mechanics, the way that things would be. Like sometimes when you force people to deadlift a certain way, that's when injuries happen. And I have very tight hamstrings and like I have a little bit of like kyphosis anyway from having big lats. So like when I try to really pull my shoulders back and really like, you know, hip hinge super like pronounced, it puts a lot of stress on my lower back. I'm actually one of those guys, like if I have a slight rounding to my upper back, it's actually, you know, easier on my lower back. So with the lightweight, I sometimes would try to go so strict form that I would actually like hinge at the wrong point and like pull with my lower back versus driving. So it was, anyway, but then that's like the same injury that had happened when I was super overweight and young that I thought I recovered from. It reared its ugly head then, but it came at such a bad time right before my son was born. And I went through 6 months of practically no sleep with a newborn. So it's just like the recovery just sucked. And it's just when like everyone knows with like back injuries, it's just like, you think you heal them and then they come back. You think and it's like, oh, everyone should just unsubscribe now because Thomas has a bad back and everything he says doesn't work because his back is busted. So I've been trying to just do a little bit lower impact stuff for a little bit, but it sucks because like my heart is really in running and it's whatever.
Cool.
Oh, we've been going for what, 3 hours?
Not too bad. 2 and almost a half.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, no, I agree with you a ton about that last piece that you were saying about the back. And I think that, you know, more of us need to follow our like intuition.
Yeah.
It's great to take advice from other people, but always do so with some caution. You know, somebody's talking about a particular exercise, a new diet, jump into fasting, whatever it is. Why not just try like a little dose of it first? I really have loved over the years that when you promote fasting, that you're oftentimes saying, hey, maybe this is something you do every other day, or maybe it's something that you just use for some leverage here and there, just to make up for overeating on other particular days and things of that nature. I think it's really helpful.
Yeah, for sure.
Absolutely.
Take us on out of here, Andrew.
Sure thing. Thank you, everybody, for checking out today's episode. Sincerely appreciate it. Please make sure you guys like this video, comment anything that you guys found beneficial during today's conversation, and subscribe if you guys are not subscribed already. Please follow the podcast at Mark Bell's Power Project on Instagram, at MB Power Project on TikTok and Twitter. My Instagram and Twitter is at I am Andrew Z. Nsima, where you at?
Nsima Inyang. Nsima Inyang on Instagram and YouTube, and Nsima Inyang on TikTok and Twitter.
Damn.
Thomas.
Yeah, where can we find you?
Where can't you find me? That's the problem. No, it's Thomas Delauer on Instagram, Thomas Delauer on YouTube. That's more or less it.
Thank you so much for coming here to Super Training. Really appreciate it.
You bet, you guys. Thanks for having me.
I'm at Mark Smelly Bell. Strength is never weakness. Weakness never strength. Catch you guys later.